from the beginning.
And I was shown that that Lucifer would return, that the UN and the Vatican were going to be completely behind it, again, under false pretenses. He's going to show up and say, I'm here to save the day, right? And, okay, fine, you know.
Yeah, of course,
ahead,
you can say whatever you want. But I've always hated censorship. It's the internet.
Sometimes, you know, once they get you for your first love bite, well, it depends on how aware you are, right?
I forgot my bullets. I never had a gun. Here I am left standing. Am I the only one? For what I see, memories have gifted me. I'll never see the sun.
First of all, as you know, the Anunnaki and the Draco are enemies. Second of all, underneath Baghdad was a stargate that was created by the Anunnaki so that they could transfer from Nibiru to the Earth.
I'll never see the sun. I could just end it all, but the demons will have won.
Magical practitioners that, you know, some are good and some use their magic for good and to heal and to help, and others do use it for evil. And, you know, in some cases, you know, people really were.
This is too much sometimes. From the broken ruins of Babylon, this is End of Days Radio. I am Daniel, your host, broadcasting to you all the way from the shimmering Emerald City, right here in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. The date is June 28th, 2017. Today's guest is Marshall Masters. Marshall Masters has worked for CNN, is a freelance writer, television analyst, and the publisher of YOWUSA.com. Marshall has been looking into destructive Earth events and other Nibiru topics, as well as future technologies and survival. Sounds interesting.
Hi, this is Marshall.
Hi, Marshall. Welcome to the End of Days.
Okay, thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. And just sitting here and working on my next project. And I just got up a new article, and it's called Signs 15, the Nemesis Cloud. And on to the next thing. I'm really kind of interested with the eclipse that's going to be happening next month on the 21st.
Oh, okay. Does this eclipse, does it signify anything?
Well, it could be something that winds up being a real watershed event for Planet X research. And I think it's a possibility that you have people who have never really considered the topic. Next thing we know, after the eclipse, we're seeing WTF videos popping up on YouTube. And that could start the ball rolling for a much broader conversation.
Yeah, it seems these WTF videos are becoming ever more and more popular. YouTube has really become a vessel or a catalyst for this type of information getting out.
Yeah, it has been. And I think I see a lot of good stuff, and then I see a lot of carpetbaggers as well. But you always have a mix of things. But overall, it's beneficial because it is a way for the information to get out there, because the corporate media, people call it fake media or corporatist media or controlled media or whatever you want to call it, they're not going to do anything until they're told by whoever owns them to do whatever it needs to be done. So in the meantime, people just have to get out there and work with each other and help each other and become self-informed. It's kind of sad that it is that way, but on the other hand, I'm really glad to see that we have a place like YouTube where folks can get stuff up, and it's a market of new ideas.
Now, going back, just so my listeners who may not be familiar with your last appearance here, would you mind just telling us a little bit about how you first realized that there was an object up in the sky?
Well, my story really goes back into the 90s, and this was after Perestroika, and I started a travel business to Russia, specializing in independent travel in small groups. And I would fly over in December and return in January, and I would always, the first couple of flights, and I went on domestic carriers, and then forget that, I went with Aeroflot. They had a better flight. And it was a polar route because I was flying out of San Francisco. And so on the trip over, it was always at night, so there wasn't anything to see. But on the way back, it was completely during the day. And my very first time was, return trip was January of 2003. And that was quite a memorable experience for me because it was the first time I had seen the Arctic from that high distance, and I saw the curvature of the Earth through an old Russian airliner built during the Cold War. So I'm sorry, I don't go for flat Earth theory, but
there X's off that question.
Yeah, take that one off. I mean, it's like, somebody asked me that once before, and I just said, well, if you can tell me, I was on an Aleutian Il-62 because it was made in 1962. And if the Soviets back then, during the height of the Cold War, were involved in this flat Earth scam, then show me the beef, prove it to me. Otherwise, I saw the curve of the Earth. And it was just an amazing thing, and I watched over the years. I was traveling every winter, go over in December, come back in January, December, January. Sometimes in the spring and in the summer, I probably made a dozen trips to Russia. And I was most impressed on that first one because it was just, the Arctic was beautiful. It was pristine. It was just white and wonderful, for horizon to horizon, and it was the first time I saw blue ice, very, very old ice, which was stunning. And over the years, I watched a steady deterioration, and I could see global warming taking place just by taking these trips and seeing every year, getting a snapshot in January. And finally, in the last time, which was 2008, I just really came to the point of saying, hey, I believe my lying eyes. We've got something going on, because this steady deterioration, finally, in 2008, what I was seeing looked like a busted windshield of a car in a wrecking yard. And this is consistent with what's happening. They keep people wondering and in doubt about, is there global warming going on? Well, ask the Inuit who live up there in the Arctic Circle. And, now they are seeing grasses and animals they never saw before. They're seeing cruise ships taking the Northwest Passage. They never saw that before. Huge changes up in the Arctic. We just don't see it that much because we're down in a very mild latitude. And I was really convinced that, yes, this was happening. And this was back in the late 90s when the term tree tugger was still an insult. But I really got into it, and I wanted to understand why the Earth was changing. And I got together with a couple of friends who are in Mensa, and we began analyzing it all. And we were able to determine that it was really not completely man-made, as folks are pushing right now. We're largely to blame for a lot of it, but the principal driver is solar. And that was when we stepped into the next thing was, well, is this a normal solar activity? And we started looking for information, but, really solar observations, the history of that is only about 300 some odd years old. And it's difficult to work with. But even then, there was no evidence of this anomalous pattern. And we're not talking about counting sunspots. We're talking about just a very slight increase in luminance, brightness. And that's the reason why, one of the many different reasons why they're doing the geoengineering spraying, or what we call chemtrail spraying, is they're putting aluminum up in the atmosphere to deal with that. But we're looking at it and going, all right, we don't see any argument for this increase in luminance being a normal solar cycle type of event. So that means the sun must be interacting with something that is perturbing it, something that's causing this to happen. And that took us to the next stage of our analysis, which we were going, all right, if this truly is what's happening, that the sun is interacting with something, then it would stand to reason that if we look at the other objects in our system, the other planets with atmospheres, we should see similar things going on there to what's happening on Earth. And that was exactly what we found. Matter of fact, to a very stunning degree, everyone's familiar that you have the big eye on Jupiter that's going away. But there was about 10 years ago, of surface warming on Mars that, if it happened here on the Earth, would have become an extinction level event for humanity. No question about it. It was that extreme. So we saw this pattern going throughout. There were just all kinds of things happening. And then you take the next step. You're saying, okay, anything with an atmosphere in our solar system is having surface perturbations, atmospheric perturbations, as a result of what's happening with the sun. And the sun is obviously being perturbed itself, interacting with something else. Now, is that something else going to be one of two things? It is either going to be a captive or a rogue. If it's a captive, it's something that's been captured in the gravity well of the sun and is in orbit around it. On the other hand, if it is a rogue, it is something that's just flown into our system, and it's going so doggone fast that the gravity well cannot capture it, and it's just going to head out the other side. And we see this happen with comets like Comet Lee back in 1999. Well, what we determined was that this was something that was caused by a captive. And then that for us really led us this path of working it out and finding the solutions to the questions that we had, brought us to the doorstep of Planet X. And we published on it when we first started back in January of 2002. It was the very first article I produced. And this was, interestingly enough, it was something that was a result of something that happened to me with PAX Television. And I had been interviewed with them for an asteroid program, which was very well done. And I was on that program with Dr. Brian Marsden of the Smithsonian Astrophysics Lab. And so they came back to me and said, well, we'd like you to talk about the Deccan traps eruptions as opposed to the Chicxulub impact theory of doing clean, which explains the extinction of the dinosaurs. And this is very briefly the Deccan traps. These are in India. Massive, huge walking lava flows, miles thick, that just put a horrendous amount of stuff up into the atmosphere. Well, what we determined, and when I looked at it, and really was thinking about it, is it was more likely you had like a 1-2 event, that there was the Chicxulub impact, and the force of that impact went through the core of the Earth, and then that energy slammed into India on the other side of the world, and there you go. That triggered those eruptions, and so literally the planet was caught between a rock and a hard place. And so that really, for me, was a very strong explanation of it. Well, they came out, PAX interviewed me, and I did the interview, did a lot of work on it. I got a lot of help on that from Dr. Marsden. He passed away, fortunately, a few years back in 2010. And we had a lot of fun, working it through and thinking about it. Well, after the interview, they took and soundbited me and twisted everything that I said. Next thing I know, according to the way they soundbited me on this show, I was saying, man and dinosaurs walk together. I was validating a biblical view. Well, oh man, that was just awful. And I had such a nice friendship with, Marsden, and he just wouldn't answer my phone.
Marshall, what were you saying? What were you saying where they were able to twist your words around? What were you really saying?
I was explaining what they'd asked me to explain, the Deccan traps eruptions. And what they did was they soundbited me, and literally I'm going, yeah, men and dinosaurs walk together. Well, I was talking about this was the extinction of the dinosaurs. So, the way they did it was they'd have me talking in general about it, and then they would show graphics over that, and then they literally took snippets of my voice and stitched them together to get what they wanted.
Yeah, that's too bad, because nowadays somebody does that to you, you can jump on social media and say so-and-so is lying, et cetera, but back then you didn't really have those opportunities.
Well, I posted the article on my website, and that was the first article, January of 2002, Did Planet X Kill the Dinosaurs? And that's what got me into it, was being soundbited by Christian fundamentalists in a very mean and unspirited, dispiriting way. And, nobody comes to this topic through some sort of formal process. You're not going to go to a college and sign up for a course in Planet X. I can guarantee you that. So for me, it was like most folks, you walk straight backwards into it. The next thing you know, there you are. And that's what happened to me. And then after that happened, the next thing was we started writing a few exploratory articles. I was really more interested in Earth changes and space threats, asteroids and global warming. But we started writing about it, and wow, all of a sudden we found ourselves smack up in the middle of this huge controversy that two people at the time back in 2003 were, this was in 2002 we were writing about it, but it was Nancy Leader at Zeta Talk was talking about there would be a catastrophic flyby in 2003, July specifically. And then there was this guy who pirated her work, stole it from her, and ignored her cease and desist demand. And his name was Hazelwood. And he wrote a book, Blindsided, which just flew off the shelves. And he didn't do a stitch of original work. He just plagiarized everything Nancy had done. And so it was Nancy and her mini-me, Mark Hazelwood, or Hazelnut, as we came to call him. And we're looking at this, and it's like, there's nothing, we're not seeing any empirical data that suggests that anything of this nature is going to happen. There's just nothing that corroborates it. And so we were publishing on that. We had articles like Zeta Fact versus Zeta Hysteria. And we wound up becoming an alternate source to Nancy. And that was a very sad time for us because we got so many emails from people who were just in a terrible state of panic. They'd write these emails and you could see they were trying to be very somber and calculating and so forth. But the fear just oozed out like, a bricklayer when he puts a brick down and the mortar oozes out and he scrapes it off with the trowel. And that's what we felt like we were doing, scraping all this ooze off with the trowel when we were answering these folks. And it was just awful because they're talking about, do I sell everything? Do I run to the hills? Do I do this? And it was like, oh, golly. It was such a sad time. And then and I can remember back then, the activity on our server, yowza.com, was just explosive. I mean, huge amounts of traffic. And came finally into July of 2003, and what we said wasn't going to happen didn't happen. And we'd called it correctly. Well, it really bottomed out interest in the whole topic of Planet X. I can remember in August of that summer, about mid-August, I published an article. It was titled, Is It Time to Revisit Planet X? And aside from ourselves, I think 4 other people read it. And, this is going from thousands, tens of thousands of views a day to 4 people read it. But the topic really went fallow for a few years there. And that was a good thing because it really took the pressure off us and we could focus on doing our scientific research. And then we had the Sumatra superquake and tsunami in December of 2004, and on the heels of that, Katrina. Between those 2 events, it really got people going, whoa, what's happening with our world? And then interest in the topic rebounded, and rebounded very strongly because also this is about the time that the cable TV networks were really thumping on the Mayan calendar theme of 2012. And they led, one of the things that people don't want to revisit it. They just go, oh, gosh, that was such an embarrassment and all that. But the fact is, we were sold a bill of goods by the cable TV companies. And you have in prophecy 2 aspects. You have a harbinger event, which is not a violent event, but one where it's clearly demonstrable that you are on a catastrophic timeline towards the prophesized event. And for the ancients, celestial observations were really crucial to how they relate information, particularly across a span of centuries, if not millennia, to future generations, which was the case here with the Mayans. And they were looking for a very specific celestial alignment. And that occurred, which is the beginning of our transit through the plane of our galaxy. And that's not something that just happens like zippity-doo-dah, 10 seconds you're on one side, on the other. It takes a long time to get through that. And we're still in that process, but we entered into it. And that's what the Mayans, ancient Mayans, were looking for, and they were telling their future generations, when you see this happening, then you know that you're going to have, you're on the threshold of some very difficult trials and tribulations that are going to start coming your way. And we actually found the empirical data that proved it. Then, I've had people that have said, well, Marshall Masters predicted Planet X on 2012. Anybody that tells you that is a bold-faced, stinking, filthy liar. I never did that. And the only time I did make a prediction about December 21, 2012 was in the August of 2012 when I was interviewed by the National Geographic. And they weren't happy with my answers because the producer said, well, Marshall, is there a direct correlation between Planet X and the Mayan calendar? And I said, not that we see. It's coincidental, but there's nothing that corroborates it. And he said, oh, okay. What are you going to do on December 21, 2012? And I said, I'm going to get up and make coffee and not take my coffee seriously. Well, my prophecy came to pass. That's exactly what I did that day. I got up and ground coffee, and I enjoyed my morning cup. And however, interestingly enough, at the time I said that in August, I was right, but for the wrong reasons. Or, wrong, but for the right reasons. Because we were looking for empirical data. We were looking for something that says, here is observable, hard evidence that anybody can independently vet on their own. That's what we were looking for, and we didn't see any of that. Well, we didn't see it at the time because the only empirical data, the only numbers that you could see prior to December 21, 2012 was the market share and advertising revenue of History Channel and Discovery and so forth. And they were just raking it in. And then after December 21, 2012, well, all of that just died out. Boom, immediately. Well, 2015, we actually said, we were talking to another researcher, and we got onto this topic. And again, you walk straight backwards into it. And we decided to revisit December 2012 and to see, well, what was the data trends, for example, for 2011 through 2012, and then beyond that in 2013 and on. And that's when we found something that just flabbergasted us. And we were using two data sets. One was meteors, particularly fireballs. And the second thing we were looking for was earthquakes of all magnitude. And the reason why we select earthquakes of all magnitude is that our government, there's a lot of earthquakes. It will not report, and those that it does report, try and remember a time when you didn't see a headline that said USGS downgraded it. So 5.1 becomes a 4.8, or a 4.1 becomes a 3.9. They're always jiggering the books and getting it down so they can tell people, well, there's no real increase in major earthquakes. Well, it's because they've cooked the books. But when you say, all right, let's just put it down to earthquakes of all magnitudes, then the picture really changes. And what we saw was right after December 21, 2012, the numbers just skyrocketed. And it's still that way. The other thing we were looking at was fireballs. And we saw the same thing with fireballs, that they too are skyrocketing. And we're still seeing, high anomalous reporting numbers. And we use a group it was founded in 1911 called AMS, American Meteor Association, or American Meteor Society, excuse me. And you can find them at ams.org. Wonderful people. They do excellent work. And please, I ask your listeners out there to get involved with them and help support their effort. And so we've been downloading their data and analyzing it. And without a question, since December 21, 2012, these two harbinger trends are just really, really taking off. And I just published my newest article, Signs 15, the Nemesis Cloud, because we've been studying this increase in fireballs, and at some point you're going, all right, well, what's the meaning of all of this? And what we believe we are seeing is that Nemesis has a cloud. And this is, for those that are familiar with our own solar system, we have at the outermost edge a ball that completely envelops us called the Ort Cloud. And then within the Ort Cloud is a Kuiper belt, which is a denser belt. And then, of course, everyone knows about the main asteroid belt in the core of our system.
Isn't the Ort Cloud where a lot of comets come from or something like that?
Well, the comets, yes, and principally they believe it's out of the Kuiper belt. And astronomers have different theories. They're going, well, this stuff was created by the gas giants kicking stuff out into the outer regions, or it's left over from when our system formed and our sun was born. There's a lot of theories and ideas, but still, this is a region of space that's way out there. And there's really not that much known about it. But we're looking at Nemesis. Now, Nemesis is a brown dwarf star. And there are people that have said, well, if you're in a binary system, then the stars are going to orbit each other. It's impossible for one star to orbit another. The two have to orbit each other, which is a specious assumption, because brown dwarfs, which are relatively new to astronomy, although they're very common out there in space, are very, very dark, and they're small. A brown dwarf is going to be about twice the size of Jupiter, somewhere thereabouts, más o menos. And in terms of mass, it's 0.08% of our sun. So it definitely, our sun is not going to share an orbit with something that's 0.08% of its mass. And that's where this specious assumption comes in. And what we're saying is that this increase in fireballs that we're seeing in this article, just go to my site, marshallmasters.com, and that'll take you straight to it. Yowza.com is the site, Your Own World USA, YOW, USA.com. And you can read the article. I get into detailing it out in very specific terms. It's quite lengthy, and there's a lot of illustrations. And what we're saying is that Nemesis has a cloud around it. And this cloud's going to be full of icy objects. And this is something that really actually goes to, when people talk about the story of Noah and the flood. And Genesis tells us that we do have subterranean seas, which science now is acknowledging. Yes, we do have subterranean seas, and they're very, very substantial. Very, very substantial.
Do you mean like oceans that are under the ground?
Yes, oceans that are underneath the lithosphere. And
Yeah,
you know,
I recall
the term
seeing
the
some kind
firmament,
of.
the lithosphere, it's the shell, outer shell of our planet. And so there are vast oceans underneath those.
Yeah, I recall just recently seeing a news article about drilling or digging or something like that, and they actually hit water once they reached a certain depth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they know, scientists know that now. But when you ask scientists about Noah's flood, they go, well, that it would, you'd have a global deluge that would last 40 days and 40 nights is impossible because there's simply not enough surface water on the planet to sustain that. And so, they go, ha, 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 we got rid of that, blow it away. Well, the Nemesis Cloud brings us back to this, all right, because the Nemesis Cloud is going to be filled with a lot of small icy objects. In other words, a lot of water. And because this is something this system goes from the core of our planet out to the Kuiper Belt and back. So it's out in the Kuiper Belt, and it could just pick up all of this stuff, just like a vacuum cleaner. And, they were, when you look at Genesis 7, all right, Genesis 7, 11, and 12. I'll read from the King James for folks. I have both the Torah and the King James Version. But in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. And then on 12, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Now the thing is that you have the fountains of the great deep and the windows of heaven. Now obviously we had all this water gushing up subterranean from the subterranean seas. But what accounts for the rains, what I believe, because in the Colburn Bible we are told that the Noah's flood, the sinking of Atlantis, and Exodus were all flyby events, previous flybys of the Planet X system through the core of our system. And those flybys are going to have best case and worst case scenarios. Now, Noah's flood was a worst case scenario because when Nemesis was crossing the ecliptic, the plane of the system, Earth was on the same side of the sun. However, during Exodus, Earth was on the opposite side of the sun when Nemesis was crossing the ecliptic, and that was a best case scenario. Now, what we're looking at is going to be another worst case scenario. We're going to be on the same side of the sun, which means we're going to have a pole shift, and that's really when you're talking about Noah's flood, of the Great Deluge, and there are probably 150 to 200 different accounts in the folklore and history and oral traditions of various peoples all around the world. So it's just not in the Bible, and frankly, in the Bible is drew upon Sumerian, the Sumerian records and other folklore such as Gilgamesh, and it was a compendium of these things. There was a lot of sharing of ideas. Well, again, we're asking, where does the 40 days and 40 nights of rain come from? What would explain that? Now, I'm not, to me, I'm not interested in validating the Bible, and I think the most disgusting thing to do is to say science proves the Bible. To me, science is science, Bible is Bible. You keep the two separate. But the interesting thing about Nemesis Cloud, if it exists, is that it would explain the 40 days and 40 nights, because Earth would be flying through this ball of small icy objects, which would be depositing vast amounts of water, frozen ice, into our atmosphere, plus you have the release of water, subterranean water. All of this is going to eventually condense into water droplets, which will then come down as rain. So what that tells us is we're looking at a flyby event that is going to be very, very difficult for us. I think a good way to think about what's coming, and I use the term tribulation not in a religious way. I just use it just the way you find it in the dictionary. It's a time of a severe testing, a trial. And I think what we're facing really, if you took the story of Exodus and Noah's flood and you bolted them together, that gives you a pretty good idea of exactly what we're facing. And that is not that far from us in the future.
So this would explain why I read a book a while ago, a few years back. It was called Arctos. I don't even remember who wrote it, but the whole main point of the book is to talk about this pole shift that supposedly happened a long time ago. And what it said was, in a lot of the ancient records and writings, all the constellations were actually flipped upside down.
Absolutely. Now, in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, a faith-based leadership guide, I give an actual blow-by-blow. That's a big book. It's about 440 pages and 140 graphics or so. It's in color. And I walk people through exactly what's going to happen, step by step by step by step by step, so they can see the celestial mechanics of what it is and how it's going to impact us, because a lot of people do not have that information. And so they're going to survive one event and think, well, we're, boy, did we, we're pretty cool, now let's go out and break out the champagne. And they're not going to expect the next thing. As a matter of fact, in my article, Nemesis Cloud, I cite Mother Shipton's prophecy. And she was a seeress who was burned at the stake back in the 1600s in England for her prophecies, but they're uncanny in terms of their realism. And the part that I quoted was, and when the dragon's tail is gone, man forgets and smiles and carries on to apply himself too late, for mankind has earned deserved fate. His masked smile, his false grandeur, will serve the gods their anger stir, and they will send the dragon back to light the sky. His tail will crack upon the earth and rend the earth, and man shall flee, king, lord, and serf. Well, in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, I actually explain this. I don't cite Mother Shipton, but what she's talking about is what I talk about in the book is transiting the tail. And this is when we're going to have when we have the pole shift, we're going to be on the same side of the sun as Nemesis, the Brown Dwarf sister star to our own star, reaches the ecliptic, the plane of our solar system. And that's when we're going to have the days of darkness, because Nibiru, its outermost major planet, is going to pass between us and the sun. And it's literally, it's just going to be pitch black. But this is also when the pole shift happens, because it is going to, the Planet X system is in a clockwise orbit. We're in a counterclockwise orbit. We're going around the sun, and it's going down and behind us. All right, so you have this massive brown dwarf, which has several planets that are larger than Earth, and they're all passing about the same time, literally. It's think of it like two convoys passing each other on the high seas, and they're going to exert incredible tidal gravitational forces, and they're going to obtain what I call lithosphere lock on the lithosphere of the planet, and they're going to pull us in an opposite direction to the way we spin. And they're also going to pull at our axis. So what will happen is that our sun is also, prior to this, we're going to have really horrendous solar storms, and there's going to be a lot of death and dying up to that. But then the pole shift event is when it really is bad. That's when billions die, not millions. And the Earth's spin will slow because these huge objects are pulling in the opposite direction of the spin. And so as our Earth's spin slows, our magnetosphere dims down. We become much more vulnerable. This is the reason why that anyone that is on the surface is not going to do very well at this time. You're going to be the proverbial poodle in a microwave.
Yikes.
So folks are going to go into the earth. They're going to go to ground. And again, in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, I give specific guidelines on that. And what will happen is our spin will slow until eventually stops. And then we start spinning in the opposite direction. And at this time, because the Planet X system is going down and, it's going at an angle below us and behind us. So that lithosphere lock is going to cause, we're going to have a crustal shift, we're going to have a magnetic shift, and we could have an axial shift.
So I'm sorry, the magnetism, the way that the poles are placed, has to do with the direction of the spin, basically.
Well, that is, the magnetism of the poles is just, and the poles have reversed. And there's historical evidence for this. Some scientists go, it takes billions and billions of years, and they give these long periods of time for a magnetic shift. But there's, geology that indicates a magnetic shift can take place in less than a day.
Oh, wow.
And this can really, really come on very, very fast. So what we will have is a magnetic shift, which has already begun. Our North Pole is moving around a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, that's true. I mean, that's something that you hear in the flat Earth world quite a bit, is that the North Pole never seems to be in the same place. However, in this case, there's a far different reason.
Right. And so you have, and also there are shifts. A few years ago, we had fly-by-wire jets that were falling out of the skies in the South Atlantic. And as a matter of fact, there for a period of time, the Russian Air Force stopped flying in that region of the world. Because when you have a magnetic shift, where literally north becomes south and south becomes north, that's where it starts, is in the South Atlantic. You have the small flips until finally the whole planet has a magnetic flip. The crustal shift is where the actual crust of the planet shifts. Now, there are some people that say, it'll shift head over heels. If that happens, I got news for you. The planet is back to single-cell animals. It is just going to be horrendous. And there's nothing historically that really suggests that. What is more likely, and here I'd have to say, I do agree with Major Ed Dames, who says if there's a pole shift, it's going to be a matter of probably about 12 to 13 degrees. And I think that is a pretty accurate estimate. And what does that mean? Well, for example, if you're in Northern California, I lived in the Santa Cruz area for a long time, and that's Northern California, grasses, scrub trees, succulents. You're up there where it's just not really conducive to growth, to lush growth. But after something like this, it would look more like the Hilo side of the big island of Hawaii. It would be very lush and green. So, for example, if you're living up in some place like Montana, after the shift, your climate is going to go to something more akin to Colorado or northern New Mexico, that kind of a shift. Then there's also an axial shift, where right now the Earth's axis is 23.5 degrees, and there are people that say that's changed. The Inuit certainly have said, because they see the sun rise and set differently than it has before. And if that changes, that inclination changes, keep in mind that's what gives us the 4 seasons, which really is why we have a very lush world, very verdant, very life-prone world. Well, if we tilt up from 23 degrees to something less than that, then there's not going to be as much differentiation between the seasons. And that really reminds me of the Lost Book of Enki, which is the autobiography of Lord Enki of the Anunnaki, who, according to that text, which the Sumerian text translated by Sitchin, he is the father of our species. We came from his loins. They've been doing a lot of genetic experimentation with hominid ancestors and infusing them with Anunnaki genes so that they could create slaves to mine gold. And they were starting to get it down to a science, and he's walking along a riverbank one day and sees a couple of good-looking Earth girls and says, I'm going to get me some of that. Next thing you know, we are modern man. And so that's how we come about, according to the Lost Book of Enki. And I can just hear fundamentalists out there gnashing their teeth. But interesting thing is, the very first calendar ever developed for our planet was by Lord Enki of the Anunnaki. Now, it's a lunar calendar, but it only had 2 seasons, winter and summer, which lends credence to the fact that perhaps at that time Earth, was not as tilted on its axis as it is now. Maybe it was 18 degrees instead of 23 degrees, all right? And because now we have the 4 seasons. Well, what happens if it goes even further? Let's say it goes to a 30-degree tilt. Well, then we're going to have extreme differences in our 4 seasons, and you're going to have incredibly blistering hot summers and incredibly freezing winters. It's going to be a very difficult time. So we're really in a sweet zone here, 23.5 degrees. And we go one way or the other, life on this planet's not going to be as green, verdant, and lush anymore. I can tell you that. So that's something that we have to, that is equally something that could happen. So you're talking about a magnetic shift, you're talking about a crustal shift, you're talking about an axial shift, and it's just a whole furball of factors that could just come together and make life incredibly difficult for the people who survive this event. And people wonder, well, who's going to live? Who's going to die? I take that on in my, I just produced an audio book series, and I did it in video book as well, called Two Suns in the Sky, Who Lives, Who Dies. You can go listen to it. Just go to twosunsinthesky.com. Takes you right there. And I really address who is going to live and who's going to die. And what I say in that series is what the 3 main leading causes of death during the tribulation will be. And a lot of folks have different ideas about what's going to cause death, but I've been studying this continually since 2002. And what I can tell you is The three things that are going to cause most of the death during the tribulation are going, number one cause will be denial. You know, people that go around saying it's all nonsense, nothing's going to happen, and I don't want to hear about it.
There's quite a few of those.
Quite a few. And, you know, they're also the ones, if they do start to talk about it, and they go, oh, well, when it happens, I just want to be ground zero and die. I don't want to survive that. You know, I'm going, I'm sorry. It's human nature. When you see the tsunami wall of water coming at you, you know, you're just not going to stand there and say, 3 years ago, I swore I was just going to die this way, and I'm going to stand here and do it. I'm a person of my word. No, they're not going to. That's human nature. That's not human nature. Human nature is you're going to turn tail, and you're going to be going for everything you can, screaming, feet don't fail me now. Right? And you're going to be scrambling for safety and doing whatever you can. That's survival instinct. It's going to kick in. So, you know, when I hear these people say, well, I'm just going to die, you know, it's like, you know, that's Hollywood-esque, but that's not real life.
Now,
the second thing, go ahead.
No, actually, go ahead and finish what you're saying. It'd probably be best if you finished your what you're getting into. Yeah, go ahead.
And then the second major cause of death is procrastination. People who are in awareness do that quite a bit. And, you know, they get into this thing of, well, you know, my family's crucifying me for talking about it, and I can't have a serious conversation with anybody, and so I'm just going to study it. And they study it, and they study it, and they study it, and I ask them, well, what are you doing? You doing anything? I'm studying it. You know, that's procrastination. Second leading cause of death during the tribulation. And then the third leading cause of death during the tribulation will be location, because 70% of the Earth's surface is water, and the vast majority of humanity lives within 150 miles of a shoreline. And and interestingly enough, if you look at the incidence of denial and procrastination, these areas that are most prone to risk are the ones where there is the most stringent levels of procrastination and denial. So those are the three major causes. And now let's get back to what you were going to say. I'm interested to know.
Well, earlier you brought up the Lost Book of Enki, and what I want to ask you is during these events that are coming up, can we be expecting the return of the Anunnaki?
I talk about that in my book, Being in It for the Species, The Universe Speaks, and I talk about that at length, and yes, we can expect the return of the Anunnaki, and it's not going to be a kumbaya moment. It's going to be more like the mafia coming to collect the vig.
So I take it that you have a pretty much a negative view of the Anunnaki. Does this include Enki himself, who is said to have tried to help mankind?
Well, there's Enki, and then there's Enlil. If Enlil comes, you know, we're in deep kimchi, because Enlil is the one that wanted to eradicate us with Noah's flood, and by not letting anyone know about it. And he's also the one that used, he was the first one to use nuclear weapons on the planet and killed off a lot of our ancestors that way. He doesn't like us. We're abominations, and he wants to get rid of the abominations. And so, you know, either way, it's still not going to be a healthy situation for us, because the Anunnaki are going to need a lot of gold. They are using, for their atmosphere, they're using gold to repair it. We are using aluminum with what we're doing with chemtrailing, which is absolutely intense out there. And the aluminum that they're spraying on us, this is not something they say, well, aluminum happens naturally in in nature. Yeah, it doesn't happen. It's not refined. It's not being sprayed on us. And all this aluminum that they're dumping on us, this is the reason why we're having this high incidence of Alzheimer's and autism, these other brain issues. Heavy metal poisoning, pure, plain and simple.
So we're actually trying to copy the way that the Anunnaki are trying to repair their atmosphere.
Well, we have the same problem that they do. This is affecting our atmospheres just as their transit through the core of their system is affecting their atmosphere. And in order for them to repair their atmosphere, they use gold. And the thing about the gold is that they don't use it for a monetary system. They don't have one per se. But it is something that's very, very effective for repairing your atmosphere. Think about when you see a spaceship and they have the gold foil. This is incredibly thin, but gold is a very good radiation shield. It's a superb radiation shield. As a matter of fact, there are those, and I'm among them, that, the Ark of the Covenant, I believe, was designed to transport some type of nuclear powered device. And that was the reason why it was lined with gold on the inside. It's one thing to say, let's line the outside with gold. That's good for show. But why line the inside with gold? Well, if you've got some sort of nuclear device in there, nuclear powered device, yeah, you definitely would want to do that. Or look at an F-16, and there's that gold tint because the pilot sits in that big canopy bubble on top of the fuselage of the aircraft. Well, if what they do when they make those canopies, which are incredibly expensive, but they have to do it that way because if they didn't put gold into the canopy of the F-16, these pilots would all be irradiated into cancers, just lickety-split, no time at all. So they put a very fine gold talcum, if you will, into the mix when they're making the canopies, and that's what gives it the golden tint, because it's literally gold in the canopy, which is saving the pilots from being irradiated with all this radiation. The Anunnaki are using gold for the exact same reason, and that's how they're going to restore their atmosphere so they don't get irradiated. And when they come, that's what they're going to want. And they're going to take they're coming for two things in particular. They're going to come for the gold for their atmosphere, but they're also going to come for women for slave breeding programs. Because, yeah, you can make a slave in a test tube, but the most capable beings are the ones that are carried to term in a mother's womb. And what they're going to do is take women, and these women are going to be used as breeders. They will be, literally made to, they'll be inseminated with these children. They'll bring them to term, and then once they're finished with them and they have what they want, then these women will be returned, and the children that they have carried to term will then be used to replace a slave population.
Now, this has happened before, hasn't it, with the Anakim or the Nephilim, the giants that are talked about in the Bible and other ancient texts. And supposedly people nowadays find their bones, and when they find them, they immediately get taken to the Smithsonian and put away somewhere, and we never hear about it again.
Yeah. I mean, there's an awful lot of cover-up on this stuff. And, yeah, they do find them. They find proof of this. But we're a slave species. All right. Humanity is a slave species. We were bred as slaves. And, I really found that to be, there are a lot of folks that go, oh, balderdash, that's nonsense. But I find it to be quite compelling because I myself have had gold fever. Matter of fact, years ago I wrote a short story called Gold Fever. You can still get it on Amazon. And this was back when I was in college, and I can tell you, gold fever is unlike anything else. A good way to put it is you're sitting there panning for gold in a river, and a Hollywood starlet comes up, carrying a silver tray with champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries, and she's completely naked and just absolutely amazing to look at, and says, "Let's party, honey." And you look up and go, "I got another hour of panning I could do. I'll take a rain check on that." Okay? That, my friend, is the power of gold fever. It's amazing, and there are other substances that you can mine that are worth ever so much more than gold. But gold, ooh, yeah. We see that, sparkly, and it's like, whoa. Yeah, it just blows every other instinct out of the water. And that makes sense if we were actually created as a slave species, because that's what you want. The slaves, gold, and then they would just work like fiends and just drive themselves, without rest until they could mine this stuff. And yeah, I definitely believe we're a slave species. We were created to mine gold. We are a bioengineered synthesis of Anunnaki genes and hominid genes, our hominid ancestors, which I think has given us some interesting attributes. From the Anunnaki side, we have this, let's go build stuff. The Anunnakis are amazing builders. No question about it. And we follow in that same line. We're just, let's go out and build stuff. And we're inventive and we create stuff. But we're also like the Anunnaki. We're warlike, egotistical. You read the Lost Book of Enki, which is, once you get into it, it's a little off-putting at first. But once you get into it, then all of a sudden it flows and it starts clicking. And what I could say is the Lost Book of Enki is like Game of Thrones with extraterrestrials, very horny extraterrestrials and spaceships. And we have that aspect of us that's very much Anunnaki. But I think what we inherit from our hominid ancestors, and if we look at ancient indigenous cultures like the Hopi, the Aborigine, we see more of that spiritual connection to Gaia, the earth, the seeking of harmony within ourselves and with all that is around us. And we inherit that from them. So we have both sides. And when we become very spiritual, we are able to communicate telepathically. And here is where I think humanity is somewhat threatening, if you will, to some species, because there are other species and they have telepathic capability, but it's limited pretty much to line of sight within a solar system, if you will. They can't go great distances with it. Whereas our ability that we inherited from our hominid ancestors, our early Aboriginal ancestors, we're able to telepathically connect with other species on the other side of the galaxy. That's powerful. That is really powerful. And for some other races who are wanting to manipulate and control us for their own benefit, it's downright worrisome and intimidating.
Are you talking about the the reptilian species that you hear so much about in the UFO community?
We're talking, there are a number of species that are involved with us, the majority of which are more on the positive side. But then we have the ones that are exploiting us. And, you know, and then within a species, think about our planet. You know, if you said, look at what Europeans did with out there and with building their empires, and they would just go in and, you know, the colonialization of the world, which was, you know, really just awful. Just walk in and do what you want to do with people and take whatever they had. And these were peaceful people that got along with their neighbors. So would you say that because of what the Dutch and the British and the Portuguese and the Spanish were doing, that all of humanity is a bunch of colonialists by nature? No. So before we would accuse an entire species of something like that, I think we need to be open to, well, they could be very, you know, they could be a lot like us in that respect, and you might have splinter groups in their species who disagree with certain tactics that are being employed. But I mean, overall, I think that the vast majority of species, and this is Edgar Mitchell, has free.org. He started that, and I would really, you know, invite people to go look at that, because they're doing very, very good analytical research on this. I've interviewed several of them, and they're finding the vast majority of people who are contactees are reporting very positive experiences. And they're reporting that the ETs are really interested in our spiritual evolution, because we're at a fork in the road. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Back after I did Surviving the Planet X, Planet X Forecast in 2012 Survival Guide, and we got that out, the first edition, in 2007. And after that, I was kind of like, what am I going to do next? And one of the things I was fascinated was I was reading up on Nobel laureates and how so many of them just got to a point with science where they couldn't get any more answers to their questions, and so they started going to the metaphysical side of things. And I figured, well, all right, let's, you know, if they're doing it, why not me? And we began a study where we were working with very talented and gifted psychics, and these the ones that were the most talented, the most gifted, were typically women in their 40s, were married in very loving marriages where their husbands were supportive of their gifts. And that doesn't happen all that often. More is the rule is you have what I call spoiler spouses. And, you know, these are people that just go into total freak out mode. Don't do this. If you do this anymore, I'm going to divorce you. You know, they're the ones that's always leaning on the nuke button. And, but these gals, you know, they'd have family, they'd have children, loving, supportive husband, and they could really pursue their talent. And we worked with several of them. The reason why we did several was because we would take them into a burnout phase. And that was because we were looking forward in time to what would happen during the Planet X flyby. And they were seeing things. I mean, we were a 3-person research team. I was the one conducting the interview. The 2 other members were with me with muted microphones who were communicating to me through instant message. And one was giving me cross-reference questions, like an attorney that you would expect from an attorney in cross-examination. And then the other one was feeding me questions that were regarding matters of science. And it was a very effective thing. It worked out really well, and we did have ways of vetting each of the sources. We were working with different guides or different talented psychics, and they would bring in incarnated, unincarnated, and extraterrestrial entities. Incarnated were spirits who had been in human form at one time. Unincarnated were spirits that had never been in human form, and then obviously extraterrestrial. Now, we couldn't, with the extraterrestrials, we didn't have a way of vetting them, but with the unincarnated and incarnated spirits, we had a very clear way to do it, because they're able to see the world, and they could see things that are happening on the surface, with weather in particular. In terms of asking about earthquakes, anything below the ground, to them, ground is ground. They really couldn't talk to that. But what we would do is we'd say, all right, well, and this was usually the last question, and we'd say, give us a weather event, no less than 6 months out, a major weather event that we'll know that you're actually, capable of doing what you're doing. And they would give us a weather event, and they would say, well, you're going to have a bunch of hurricanes coming late in the seasons, grouped together, and things like that happened. All of the weather predictions that were 6 to 12 months out, all of them, boom, dead on. But the one that really impressed me the most was one entity that said, you are going to have a cyclone in the Pacific that is going to head towards Baja, Mexico. Then it's going to change course and head directly for San Diego, but it will either dissipate at sea or cross land as a high wind. Well, that event happened exactly as that entity said. It was a typhoon, came in, deviated from Baja, was going straight towards San Diego, and then probably about 200 miles out to sea, it fell apart, and that was it. It dissipated. And so these were the kind of things that we'd have. And the interesting thing about the ETs that we were in contact with was that there was a consistent thread amongst them. They were always talking about the same issue. With the incarnated and unincarnated spirits, it was different. Unincarnated spirits were pretty much what I would call strategic thinkers in how they talked about things, whereas the incarnated were more boots on the ground kind of conversations. And
by unincarnated versus incarnated, you mean some of them were actually existing out there in physical bodies, and some are bodiless? Do I have that right?
Well, no. If they had been incarnated, they had been at one time in their existence. They walked the planet as a human being. Mm-hmm. This really goes to reincarnation. And so, which is the natural order of things. And I know there are people that say reincarnation doesn't exist. Well, the majority of human beings on the planet believe that it does. It's just a very vocal minority that shouts it down. I, for one, believe in reincarnation, especially after, what I had learned through this period of research, which we conducted for 18 months. So incarnated was someone who had walked the earth as a human at some time, whereas if they were unincarnated, they had never incarnated in human form, maybe in some other species, but not in ours. And the unincarnated ones really had more what I would very broad level view of things, kind of like, think about like the general on the hill that sees the battle from afar, where the ones who are incarnated, they had more practical boots on the ground experience and could, those conversations were very fruitful in terms of the information that they would share. And But with the ETs, the funny thing was, didn't matter who, they would always, every dialogue, this was a consistent pattern with the different psychics, who none of the psychics we used knew each other. They didn't even know the others existed. We kept that part of the study. That was a blind firewall. And because these women were from different parts of the U.S. and Canada, they had no idea. They were not professionals. They were not working at it professionally. We tended to steer away from professionals. And interestingly enough, they started popping up on, when we needed them, it was like the other side was bringing them to us. And, but with the ETs, it was always came down to, look, you guys are at a crucial point in your evolution, spiritual evolution. If you choose wisely, you're going to gain your freedom as a species. You choose unwisely, you are going to become rigidly enslaved for countless generations to come. And you are not going to be freed until there's really nothing left of you in your world that's worth exploiting. And then you'll be like us, because we made a bad choice and we wound up paying for it. And we don't want to see you go through and make the same mistake we did. And which is really, if you look at what the Hopi Prophecy Rock is telling us, that's exactly the message of the Hopi Prophecy Rock, that we're at this pivotal point where either we take the high road and evolve and we have a wonderful world, or we keep going the way we're going, and it's not going to be very pleasant and sure not going to work out too well for us. And that was what the ETs were always saying. And one of the towards the end of this study, I was always kind of curious, and there was one question I wanted to ask him, and I finally got around to asking this one. It was a very polite ET, and you don't talk to them in any kind of, do you eat mangoes? You don't do stupid stuff. You talk to them just like I'm talking to you. That's it. That's how you talk to them, and the entities as well. And so we were wrapping up the conversation, and I said, I got one last question. Diana asked this question. Sure, go ahead. You're on the other side of the galaxy. Odds are we'll never see each other. Odds are you'll never even see our planet, or we'll show up from our planet on your planet. So what's in it for you? Why are you so interested in what's happening to us here on Earth? Why do you care? Well, the answer I got to that really floored me. The answer was, Earth has 2 billion native souls. There are 2 billion souls that are perpetually reincarnating on our planet. And they said, but you got 7 billion souls on the planet right now. And that's because the other 5 billion have come from other planets to incarnate at this time to help your species through this evolutionary period. And the reason why we're interested is you've got our ancestors. So, of course, we want to follow up with you and see what things are going. And we want you to take that good step forward. Don't squander this wonderful opportunity. So, that was, for me, that was just a jaw-dropping explanation, but it sure did make sense. So, here we are, 7 billion and growing. And where are all of these souls coming from? They're coming from all over the galaxy. It's part of the cosmic plan. And yeah, there's going to be a massive amount of death and dying during the coming tribulation. But with 7 billion people, there's going to be too many of them for the elites to re-enslave all that easily. If they can whittle us down to 250 million or less, that's what they really want. That's the reason why there is so much cover-up and manipulation on this topic and suppression, is because they want as many people to die as possible because the numbers are more manageable. Because once we go into the tribulation, all the shackles of slavery are going to be cast off.
Are you
The
referring
disaster
to...
is going to take all of their control mechanisms. Everything they do to control us, manipulate us, keep us fighting against each other, divided, and depressed, and all of this stuff that they do to make us unhappy so they can control us and divide, all of their control mechanisms are going to be shattered.
Are you referring to the Illuminati?
Yeah. You're talking about the people who are running the world, the 1% of the 1%. I mean, we have a slave planet, for gosh sakes. When you have less than 1,000 people that own 90% of the world, that's a slave planet. I don't care what you call it. That's a slave planet. And so they know what's coming. They've been preparing for this for a very, very long time. And their whole emphasis is on re-enslaving the species. Because for them, we're necessary to their existence and what they want to do. And there are also, for dark forces, if we evolve spiritually as a species, they're not going to be able to exploit us as they do now and feed off of us. So we do head for that Star Trek future. That's what the vast majority of races in our galaxy want for us, is that we do have a Star Trek future, that we do embrace them as friends, that we don't show up like in the movie Avatar, where we're colonization. And in Avatar, it's just terrible what we're doing. We're the bad guys. I think that was a brilliant aspect to that. And I look forward to, hopefully we can see the rest of that series before the guacamole hits the fan. But
is the Illuminati working with Satan or maybe a negative alien group?
All of the above. I mean, you have cabals and layers within layers within layers within layers. And it's really a matter of humanity if you think of humanity as a body, it is infected with a wide-ranging host of parasites. And, the parasites are fighting amongst themselves to, get more of what they want. And like parasites, they absolutely are indifferent to what they're doing. For them, it's, there's always another sucker born every minute. They never estimate that their food source is ever going to go away. But, for the elites now, and I don't care what you call them, Illuminati, these are the folks there. You could just say they're the puppet masters. They're the ones pulling the strings from behind the curtains. And the last thing they want is for humanity to achieve what is rightfully what Creator wants for humanity. All of these races in our galaxy, the vast majority of them, They want to see us have a Star Trek future. They want to see us evolve spiritually and do wonderful things and achieve our potential. And so do these other races. And that is a big reason why they're involved. So there's a huge tussle that's going on. I see that. And I see what's at stake. And it is the evolution of our species. That's what's really at stake. And if those who are the parasites of our species do not want to see us evolve, because the minute we do, we're beyond their reach, we're beyond their grasp. And they're going to have to either find some other food source or die.
Could the Vatican be involved on some level? I always seem to hear them either making new announcements about aliens or building telescopes such as the Lucifer Observatory, which, from my understanding, may or may not actually exist.
Well, are you talking about the observatory in Arizona?
You know what? I don't even remember
Mount Hamilton?
That sounds
they have
right.
An observatory in Mount Hamilton out in southeast Arizona. And it's actually, there are a lot of folks that go, how did they manage to shoehorn their way into a publicly funded institution? But they did. And Mount Hamilton is, people don't know this, but there's really not that many ideal areas on the globe for viewing the skies. Mount Hamilton is one of them that is really an optimal place for viewing the sky. And particularly with regards to the coming flyby of the Planet X system through the core of our system, because that observatory is going to have the longest uninterrupted viewing sky of the event. And that's important.
Marshall, is there... one thing that I've been thinking about doing personally is I've been thinking about buying one of these telescopes. If I was to buy a telescope, would it assist me in seeing any of these celestial events? And if so, is there a particular brand or type that you might recommend?
Well, I don't know that I would say get a telescope, because we're going to have a point in time where the viewing skies are just not going to be there. I would say that you could get yourself a good set of binoculars, like big pair of Celestrons. And you can get these on Amazon for a few $100s, and you're going to be able to put them on a tripod and see things while they're going to happen. You're going to be able to get a closer view of it. But once things really start to pop, we're going to have a lot of volcanism. Right now, the big story is what's happening in Yellowstone. All these earthquake swarms that are happening, and which is an unsettling trend for many, because it tends to indicate that you have magma movement. And once this tribulation starts, we're going to have massive earthquakes. Right now there's a huge supervolcano off of Naples, Italy. And this is the one that Mount Vesuvius is part of that system. And it's on a danger list. So all of a sudden, let's say we have 3 or 4 supervolcanoes, Krakatoa, big ones like that. I mean, these things start popping off. Your telescope's absolutely worthless. Absolutely worthless. But on the other hand, if you have a good a good huge pair of binoculars, all right, then you have something that you can use for defense of your community. Because now, you can see it like the one I like is I have a personally, I have a Celestron Skymaster. It's 15 by 70. And you can get those online for $179. There's other ones that are even more expensive or less. The Skymaster, 20 by 80. You can get those for about $125. Now, I think that is really practical because it's wonderful for viewing the skies, and you see it, you aim at it, there you go. And the nice thing about it is when you're not using that for observing the skies, it's a great way to be seeing what's happening in the far distance around your survival community. It's good for surveillance. So it'd give you bang for the buck there.
Okay, awesome. And another topic that you brought up was the tribulation, as well as a lot of talk about things going on with alien groups and stuff like that. My question is, perhaps you've heard information about this, but I've heard from a lot of different sources on YouTube mostly. That's where I do a lot of my research. But apparently a lot of people believe that there's going to be a false disclosure or some sort of alien deception in the future where one alien group might come forward and actually pretend to be our creators, might pretend to be the Anunnaki. Do you foresee something like that possibly happening?
Yeah, it could happen. I mean, I see that, we're going to have to be really, really smart and discerning in how we look at things. And I think people are starting to do that. We're starting to look at the mainstream media with disgust. And it was interesting. The mainstream media is the one that invented the term fake news. And guess what? Boom, flipped right back on them, blew back into their face because their credibility is so heavily challenged. And whether you're, regardless of what you feel about Donald Trump, look at what's just happened recently with CNN and the obvious bias in their reporting, and all they're doing is trumping it up with this Russian angle because their audience tunes in for that and they're selling advertising, so that they want the money. And yeah, I mean, there's larger media outlets, but it's that visibility, and it's really sad things. So I think rather than going, who can we trust? Who can we trust? Who can we trust? My philosophy has always been the only truth that matters is the truth that resonates within you because you and you alone put it there. Nobody else. And that's the only thing you believe. Believe yourself. And don't get taken in by all of this because there's a lot of self-serving interests out there, a lot of manipulation. Now, I hear the question all the time from people, when am I going to see Nibiru with my own two eyes? When am I going to see it with my own two eyes? And to me, it's really a death question because when people are seeing it with their own two eyes, they're standing out in the street and they're looking at it with friends and family and neighbor. They're going, hey, you ever seen anything like that? No, let's go in and watch CNN, see what they say. And all of these fake news channels are going to say the same thing. They're going to say, it's just an interesting light show. Don't worry about it. It'll pass overhead. It's not going to hit us. Don't worry about it. Well, that's absolutely true. It will pass overhead, and it will not hit us. But it is going to wreak havoc on our planet, and it's going to interact with the sun, and we're going to have solar storms and impact events and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and all kinds of nasty things going on. But initially, when everybody's seeing it, those, that to me is the last window of opportunity to begin preparing. When I wrote my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, I looked at it and I said, okay, is there a period of time that I target this book for? And this is the period of time that I am thinking about, because I know this is going to happen, that there will come this moment when everybody sees it and they're going to run into the house and they're going to go, let's see what the talking heads are saying. And they're not going to ask the questions of themselves, because what they're really going to want to hear, the thing about propaganda and disinformation is what makes it work is it's a participatory process. It's what people want to hear. If they want to hear the lies, that's what they want to hear. And if you give it to them, then then they just say, well, I don't have to be responsible for thinking for myself anymore. I've been duly lied to, and I feel ever so much better about it. And that's what we're going to see happen. They're going to tell people, don't worry, it's just an interesting light show. They're going to minimize it. I'm already seeing where there's all of this posturing that they're getting ready to deal with the questions of, well, why didn't you see it coming? And all of a sudden now, we're having these discoveries of objects in the Kuiper Belt. Now we have the Planet 9, we have a Planet 10, and we have new theories that all stars are born as twins, and all of this is starting to pop up out of nowhere. I mean, I can remember talking about this very stuff and being mocked and ridiculed fiercely by folks in the pseudo astronomy, these amateur astronomers that proclaim that they really know what they're talking about. And it's like, I never understood that, because all you have to do to become an amateur astronomer is buy a telescope at Costco, and then have it framed. So you take your Costco receipt and you have it framed, and under there you can put a brass plaque, IR amateur astronomer. Okay? And so, I'm serious. And these people just think, they just talk with the authenticity of gods. But I find that a lot with science. To me, scientists are people who say, I'm the only one who has a right to be wrong because you're too stupid to figure it out for yourself. And unfortunately, that's what we see most often, this egotism in science. But there's a lot of misleading. I see a lot of posturing. They're getting ready so that they can go on and say, well, yeah, we've been looking for this and we've been looking for that. And they're going to say, why didn't you find it? And what are they going to do? They're going to pull out the same lame excuse they did in 2013 with the Chelyabinsk meteorite. And they're going to say it came out of the sun. We don't look that way. It worked in 2013. Old tricks are the best tricks. So that's what they'll do. That's how they'll dismiss it. But the bottom line is 80-90% of the people want to hear the lies. And in Two Suns in the Sky, Who Lives, Who Dies, I explain in very, very close detail exactly why that works just that way. Who is going to want to believe the lie and why they're going to want to believe the lie. There's a lot there to go into, and so again, your listeners can just go to twosunsinthesky.com and they can watch. It's a 3-part series, and now, they can digest it a little bit at a time.
Is the planetary body, Nemesis, whatever we're calling it, is it going to get close enough that it appears as the same size as our sun?
That's hard to say. Interestingly enough, Ed Dames says that when we see it in the sky in November of this year, Planet X, or what he's calling Planet X, will be the size of the moon. And what folks need to understand is that we're talking about what's called a mini constellation. You have a brown dwarf with planets and moons in orbit around it. And they're not in this nice racetrack pattern like we have in our system. It's a fur ball. They're all different angles and different different orbits. It's just weird. It kind of reminds you of, the old movies that you saw in college, about atoms, and here's these elements in the atom, these parts of the atom that are in orbit around it, and everything's just helter-skelter, but it seems to work. And the as this thing comes in, you're going to have leading elements that are going to be visible first. And then the other elements are going to follow behind. So it could very well be that we're seeing the outermost planet, Nibiru, first. But it could be a year before Nemesis actually reaches its point of perihelion, where it's nearest to the sun, it starts, from our field of view, it starts coming in front of the sun and going high over our heads. So it's very difficult to predict exactly what we're going to see when we're going to see it, because we're going through a long process. And the people that can give you the exact, precise answers to the question are the ones that own the assets, all the big observatories and space-based stuff, and they've got all the secret files, and they know all of this stuff. They've been tracking it, and they can predict with stunning accuracy what's going to happen and when. For us, what we have to be mindful of is there's a process that's involved. And this thing is going to, everybody always going, win. I call them the frogs. They sit there and go win. And I have found over the years the fastest way to make somebody sit there, took us on the ground, glue it to the floor with about 15 tubes of crazy glue, is to give them a date. And it's the strangest thing, but all you got to do is give somebody a date, and that's it. They don't prepare. They don't do anything. They just glue their butt to the floor. That's all. But it's a process of events and things that are going to happen. So we have to be ready for the initial phase of it, or we're going to have impact events and solar storms, things like that.
Is looking into this information dangerous? I've read in several places that people that have looked into Nibiru, Planet X, Nemesis, etc., they're actually being killed.
Are you talking about professional astronomers?
Not sure if they're professionals or not. I just read that so-and-so made this discovery. They were about to show the world. Next thing you know, they die mysteriously.
Well, they take out people who have, particularly if they're credentialed and they have strong gravitas. They're the kind of people that if they say it, folks are going to listen to them. Yeah, they're going to stop that. I mean, classic example. When I was in high school, and in the late 60s, early 70s, and back then, that was when we really started talking for the first time about us living in a binary star system and Nemesis Theory. And it was really exciting. There were a lot of people talking about it. I can remember. See, that's where I got my initial interest in us living in a binary star system. It was from my high school science teacher, who was absolutely enthralled with Nemesis Theory. Everybody was. It was an amazing thing at the time. And that's the reason why so many folks who are in awareness today, one of the reasons why so many of the folks in awareness today, and it's really kind of sad that the coverage was clipped, but I talked to them, I remember Nemesis Theory when I was in high school, grade school. I remember it, you betcha. And there was an astronomer, Robert H. Harrington, and he was the chief astronomer of the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. He was one of the guys that actually helped with the discovery of Charon, the moon of Jupiter, which was able to tell the to everybody that it was involved in the search for Planet X, and they thought they had found Planet X when they found Pluto, because it was Neptune's perturber. But Pluto turned out to be, once they found Charon, they said, wow, they did the measurements on it, and they said, this thing's small. Pluto is a planet, but it's only 60% the size of our own moon. That's pretty small. So it didn't have the mass to be Neptune's perturber, and the search for Planet X was continuing. Now, this government astronomer, published a brilliant white paper on Planet X and the location of it, and he actually had a special purpose telescope constructed and sent to the Birch Observatory in New Zealand, which was owned and operated by our government, for a sky survey to go out there and look for Planet X. And the work was done. The plates were returned to the United States. And as soon as they were returned, NASA got their hands on them and buried it, and that was the end of it. And unfortunately, though, for this astronomer, he appeared in an interview with Zecharia Sitchin, author of The 12th Planet. And they both agreed on common things, that this object is in a clockwise orbit, not a counterclockwise orbit. And it's a long period orbit, 3,600 years, and that's lunar years, not Gregorian calendar years. That's a very important distinction. Well, he appeared in this television documentary with Sitchin, and then he was actually pointing out and showing his calculations and where he felt Planet X was at. But he said something that I think that was what really got him into trouble, was that he expressed the opinion that it was possible for there to be life on Planet X. And man, that was the kiss of death. And it wasn't that long after that he died from a very rapid onset of a cancer that is known to be used by intelligence agencies for targeted assassinations. And his wife firmly believes that he was assassinated. He was still a fairly young man. He was in his prime. And so, when you have people that have gravitas, back in the 80s, I was a CNN science feature producer, but I don't have a PhD. I'm not under government grant, so I don't have that gravitas. But if you have somebody that has gravitas, all right, like a Harrington, then he definitely crossed the line, and that was it. They clipped him. They clipped him hard. And one of the things that we tracked, because going back, there was a huge amount of discussion in the 80s about Planet X, and I'm talking New York Times, Washington Post, and so forth. There was even a NASA astronomer, John Anderson, who gave an interview to the Victoria Advocate. By the way, once I reported on that interview, the entire newspaper for that day was actually redacted, yanked out of the Google News service. They covered it up. But he said, there's out there, Planet X, we got a perturber out there. And so there was a lot of mainstream media coverage. There was a lot of good conversation about it. But when Harrington was assassinated, that was it. It was like the whole conversation went off a cliff. Boom. Died. Just outright died.
Marshall,
And
how about NASA? Have they become corrupt? Are they part of this cover-up?
yeah, that's why everybody, says NASA, never a straight answer.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, look, they don't, the guys that are running NASA and making the calls on this, they don't want to eat a bullet. They're all thinking about themselves, their careers, their retirement, their families. It's me and the hell with everybody else. And that's really where it boils down to. Because the ones who are courageous, the ones who have the guts to stand up and talk about it, usually do not, have a good experience, unfortunately. And so, it's when this does come around, I mean, Planet X is going to be a terrible shame for the science community. It's going to be a terrible shame. And they're going to, these agencies, these institutions, and I mean, all of this stuff is controlled by the federal government. Just recently, you probably saw in the news about Planet 9, Caltech, and Mike Brown, the Pluto killer.
Yeah, I did see some headlines about that.
Yeah, well, what happened was, and now there's astronomers that are coming out and they're just shooting real big holes in it, okay? And so his little scheme is dying on the vine. But what happened was, this really goes back to a discovery made by the Alma Observatory in Chile. This is a huge, it's the biggest telescope in the world at the time. It's a big array telescope. And they observed two objects out in the Kuiper Belt that they were talking about. And the speculation was one object, both of them were very, very big. One was like a massive rocky planet, many times, 7 to 10 times the size of the Earth. And the other was a potential candidate for an extremely cold brown dwarf star. Very old, very cold. And when I saw that they were raising the prospect of a brown dwarf star, that was when I knew these guys were going to seriously get hammered. I mean, really, really hammered. And that's exactly what happened. And they, what they did was the attack team, they had, and I document this on my site, so you can go out and read how they did it. But it was Washington Post. This is Jeff Bezos owns that. I mean, he's total suck up to the PTB. He's a total PTB suck up. And if you want an axe job on something, you go to Bezos. Then doesn't hesitate to do it. And, there are a lot of folks that in this genre, their books are suppressed and, crushed, and it's because of Amazon. Amazon is not the best thing for free speech. And what happened was they needed to go out and crush these guys, both in the media and politically. Now, politically, that was undercurrents. It was going because what Alma did was they did good science. Who'd have thunk it? They published white papers, 2 of them. And the white papers, you can download them from my site, and they were brilliant. All right. And what were they doing? They were just saying to other astronomers, hey, we spotted this stuff, guys, so why don't you turn your scopes to the sky and look along with us, and if we got a one-trick pony here, then we'll pull the papers. But let's go out and solve the mystery. Let's work the puzzle. Well, working the puzzle is the last thing the elites want, especially when they are talking about the possibility of us being in a binary star system. This is there are two taboos. You can talk about Planet X until the cows come home. But two things, if you have gravitas, you're a professional, two things you do not talk about is that we're in a multiple sun system, and the other is that there is intelligent life on another object in orbit around our sun, other than us. Those are two things that kiss of death. Kiss of death. You are going to be in deep, serious kimchi if you cross that line. Well, they crossed the line because they're raising the prospect of us being in a multiple sun system, which actually is consistent with 90% of the solar systems in our galaxy. Who'd have thunk it? So what happens is that the elites hit them with a 1-2 punch. On the down low is the political pressure. Huge, huge political pressure. On the other side, they had to kill the story. They had to kill the name and to disgrace the discovery. So what they do is they go out and they go, okay, we need a professional astronomer with an ego the size of a planet. Hello, Mike Brown, Caltech. This guy's got an ego the size of Jupiter. All right? He calls himself the Pluto killer. Not because he discovered anything or did any science that proved that Pluto is the 60% the size of our moon. He's just the guy who led the charge to have Pluto demoted as a planet. So his claim to fame is purely a political exercise. Well, fine. So they go get him. And now the next thing they do is, of course, they got Bezos, and they're going, we need to do an axe job on these guys out there in Chile. Oh, sure, happy to, anything for the club, that's it. That's old Bezos, anything for the club. Yeah, we'll do it through Washington Post. And so they go to Washington Post, and what they wanted to do was so ridiculously vulgar and venomous, they couldn't get any serious reporter on staff at the Washington Post to do it. Nobody was going to put their career on the line for that kind of vitriol. Nah. So what they did was they get this gal who, she doesn't know a lick about, she doesn't know anything about astronomy. Nothing. Her depth on the topic is tissue thin. I'm talking 1-ply, not even 2-ply. I'm talking about that cheap industrial pink looking stuff, And what does she write about? She writes about, well, where do you go in town to get the best bagel? All right. So she's writing this article. Her name is Sarah Kaplan, but I call her Bagel Babe. So you got Pluto Killer and Bagel Babe. Tag
Marshall, you have some
Jeff Bezos.
Marshall, you have some awesome nicknames.
Thank you. And so here's Bagel Babe, and what you read the article, and it is a character assassination of the first order. I mean, it was just sick. It was reading it just was a terrible experience for me, because it was like I couldn't, what the things that she is quoting Mr. Pluto Killer of Caltech, Brown, the man with an ego the size of Jupiter. And he's out there slurring these people, smearing their reputations and their competence. And then she's piling on, and she's not only are they getting the guys in Alma, but I know this is a Bezos propaganda thing, because Bagel Babe is then starting to smear Percival Lowell and Clyde Tombaugh. Now, Percival Lowell, around the turn of the last century, founded the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. It It was actually one of the first major observatories in the country. He was a wealthy Bostonian. He financed it, and he built a Lowell Observatory. And while he was famous for mapping the canals of Mars, that's not why he built the Lowell Observatory. He built it to find Planet X. That's what he was looking for. Percival Lowell is the father of the American astronomical community's efforts to find Planet X, Neptune's perturber. And an employee, Clyde Tombaugh of the Lowell Observatory, is the one who discovered the planet Pluto in 1930. Now, these men, long gone and dead, and Bagel Babe is just smearing them and ridiculing them viciously. You know? I mean, it's like Bagel Babe and the whole propaganda schmear. You want it with locks or you want it without? You know? You could just see her slapping it on the bagels. And it was disgusting. But they did that. Now, meanwhile, what are they doing? In the background is the political pressure. And guess what happens? The observatory is forced to retract the papers. Not at the speed of science, mind you, but at the speed of politics. And, you know, so it was just a disgusting shutdown. So what happens? Mike Brown and Bagel Babe win, plus all the other machinations going on. But they created a vacuum. And if you're going to control the narrative, you just don't kill the message maker and let it go at that. The message can resurface. You've got to replace the message with a new narrative. So then all of a sudden comes out this huge discovery that there's Planet 9. Okay? And that's how the Planet 9 comes into the story. And, not literally, and you could tell it was something that they slapped together. I mean, I could just sit there and say, you got something out there we can control the narrative with. You got an idea, got a theory, we can do something with it. Yeah, we got this old thing. It's half cooked, half baked. It's been on the shelf for a long time. We'll just dust it off, dress it up a little bit, and we'll ship it out there. And so that was then all this hullabaloo that we see on Planet 9 is just a crock. It's just a total, utter crock. I mean, the work was so shoddy and defective that literally within a few weeks after they put it out there, Italian astronomers came back and said, half of the sky, your Planet 9 is not even going to exist in half of the sky that you say it could be there as well. So what does that show? There's no peer review process. There's no discipline, no nothing. That's it. Blow it out there. All right. Now and I think that, for astronomers, seeing this vulgar treatment of these honest, decent, hardworking guys who are trying to do good service, to do good science in Chile, I think that really got under a lot of folks' skin. And now you're starting to see more articles come out by professional astronomers who are just blowing big holes in Planet 9. And now we supposedly have a Planet 10 that's been discovered by astronomers in Arizona. So this is the way it's all played out, but it's controlled the narrative.
Do you suppose that this applies towards other things too, such as free energy or anti-gravity technology?
There's there's control over all of this stuff. And there are, over the years, I've done a lot of work on following what people call free energy. All right, I call it 0 point energy, and because there's no such a thing as a perpetual energy machine. All right, but you have 0 point energy, and there was I followed this group, and they were in Australia. They were called Lutech. The company has been acquired by a Japanese company, and now they're selling, I don't know, window shades or something. But they got buried, but they actually developed a working 0 point energy generator. And this was, quite a few people were coming out with this about 10 years ago, and they killed all of it. Now, what is 0 point energy? 0 point energy, it's really a simple concept. We know that over 95% of everything is comprised of dark matter and dark energy and a few other things. Okay? That what we see in the night sky, that's about 5% of everything that there is. And so 0 point energy is able to tap into dark energy and siphon it out. And that's all you're creating is like a siphon pump. So where does it get 0 point from? Where does that expression come from? Well, if you are, look at a sine wave on an oscilloscope, it's going up and down and up and down and up and down. It goes, you have the positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, up, down, plus, minus, whatever. And then, but there's that line that cuts right across the center, and that's the 0 point. That's where nothing can be measured. Well, 0 point energy is about working right at that line where you don't have anything that's measurable, because that is where dark energy exists. So they create electrical siphoning mechanisms that work at 0 point and can then extract the energy out of that. It takes energy to get the machine working. But once it's working and the pump starts pulling, it's just going to pull continuously. And Lutech had a working generator, period. Worked very well. And matter of fact, there was an island in the South Pacific. They installed it to replace the diesel generation system for the island, because the island was just, so we really don't want to pay for all this diesel fuel anymore to run our generators. Lutech built a custom large version of their device, put it up there, and it's still running to this day if they haven't, managed to remove it, which probably they have. So, yeah, I've covered this stuff. These devices, this technology's out there, has been for a long time. But it's sure not terribly convenient for energy companies, especially when they can go up to the Arctic, because the Arctic is now, because of global warming, they're going to be able to drill oil in the Arctic. And yet, you ask them about global warming, they go, natural variability. We're not doing anything. And other people go, oh, okay, all right.
No,
but that stuff's out there.
We know that we're in for some major catastrophe. We know that there's some bad stuff on the horizon. Marshall, are there some tips that you could give us to survive all of this? Are there certain places that we should go, certain things that we should buy, certain things that we should do in preparation?
Well, that's what I talk about in Two Suns in the Sky. And I give people exactly that information about what they can do to increase their capability of think their way through it, of how to do reconnaissance to find some place to move to. I mean, when people talk about it, you start talking, you get these simplistic things like, well, get steel wool and a 9-volt battery to start your fires. You know, it's like whoop-de-fizz. The 3 main causes of death. 1, denial. It's all nonsense, nothing going to happen, I don't want to hear about it. Second major cause of death, procrastination. Okay, so it's going to happen, but I'm going to keep studying it and studying it and studying it instead of doing something constructive. Instead of thinking, what can I do? I'm going to sit there and watch all the YouTube videos I can with salacious titles. I mean, it's like, you go to YouTube and search on Planet X and best. Planet X best. You put that search string in there. And you see all of this, you know, now we got jokers out there who are selling Planet X like laundry soap. It's sickening. All right. And people are going for these salacious headlines. It's sickening because it's feeding the procrastination. People who think, as long as I'm studying it, I'm doing something constructive. No, here's your stupid sign. You're not. And then what's the third major cause of death? It's going to be location. The vast majority of humanity lives along a coastline. And for people to move inland, it's huge. You take a loss in prestige, in income, you lose access to the arts and local culture, personal network of family and friends. And so what happens? They hit relocation, and even though they're saying, yeah, it's coming, it puts them right back into the second leading cause of death, procrastination. The worst I see of it is for grandparents who are in awareness and their children are saying, don't tell my kids about it. Don't tell your grandchildren about this. And they live in a ground zero place like Los Angeles or New York. And these grandparents are absolutely beside themselves because their family's sitting there in a ground zero situation. So what are their choices? Well, they can just go, well, they choose to die. I'm going to go do what I need to do and move forward. So they let their progeny die. That runs counterintuitive to human programming. Or they decide, I'm going to watch things and get to a point where I can go abduct my grandchildren and get them to safety. That's a stupid idea. Or they try and find peace with a death wish. They move to ground zero to be near their progeny so when they are dying, they can explain to them why they're dying, when they're dying, and then the bloodline ends right there. So what can you do? I mean, it's really, really tough, but I address all of these things, particularly in surviving the Planet X tribulation. So if you want to know what you can do, you got to think your way through it. That's the reason why I wrote Surviving the Planet X Tribulation. It's a huge book, and it gives people who have big hearts and small wallets an understanding of what they have to do and walks them through the process. But again, watch Two Suns in the Sky. Understand why. We're talking about 90% of the people are going to die. There's a very clear reason for that. It's explained, and that's important to know. But again, denial, procrastination, location. If you focus on solving those big problems, the rest of it's detail, my friend.
All right, awesome. Marshall, we are approaching the end of the interview, unfortunately, but I did want to go ahead and open things up and let you go ahead and get up on the soapbox one more time if you'd like to say any last words to our listeners out there. And also if you'd like to go ahead and follow that up with any plugs that you might have, any upcoming talks, anything at all that you might have going on, please feel free to do that right now.
Okay. Well, first thing, folks, surviving the Planet X tribulation is not about holding on to things. It's about holding on to each other. And don't think like a consumer that you got to start buying stuff. because surviving is going to be less about the having of things and more about the knowing of things. And if you'll discipline yourself to take the time to learn valuable survival skills, be in awareness, and start doing something proactive, doesn't matter. As long as you're moving the ball down the field, if it's 1 millimeter at a time, that's progress. But you got to start doing it. You got to start doing it today. Watch my video series. Doesn't cost you a dime. twosunsinthesky.com. That's twosunsinthesky.com. You can read all the articles I publish for free on my website, marshallmasters.com, which is also yowusa.com. And then, if you're really ready, you're in awareness, and you, particularly if you have grandchildren, you're going, oh my God, how am I going to get us all through? Because I don't even have a pot to pee in mostly. That's who I wrote my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, for. People with big hearts and smart wallets, help them get through what's coming ahead. So there it is.
All right. Marshall, thank you so much for an awesome interview today. I'd definitely like to do this again someday.
Sure enough.
All right. Until then, you have a good day, my friend. Thank you once again.
You're most welcome. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And there you have it. That was Marshall Masters talking to us about Nemesis / Planet X / Nibiru / there's so many names for it, but it is out there. We're going to go ahead and take a break. I'll play you some music, and we'll come back, and there's a few things I want to talk about. As per usual, I got some news here, got a letter, got some topics to talk about. We'll come back and vamp for a bit. I'll talk to you then.
Tomorrow.
from the beginning.
Hello and welcome back to The End of Days, starring me, Daniel, coming at you from the broken ruins of Babylon. Hold on, let me get comfortable. Oh, yeah, that's better. Oh, much better. Okay. Much better now. Now I'm comfortable. So, that stuff is pretty scary, right? That stuff we were talking about just now. People disappearing because they looked into the wrong thing, looked into free energy, looked into some of these large, mysterious bodies out in space. I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're thinking that this is all bullshit. There's no way that I could ever get into any trouble of any kind for looking into these topics because they're fake anyways, right? Wrong. It can happen to anybody, really, but I think that the guest today, I think that he made a very good point. Usually for them to go after you, you have to be somebody with some sort of credibility. You have to be some sort of authority on the subject. You have to be somebody that people will actually listen to. Now, I'm covering a lot of this stuff, so I just wanted to say to everybody out there that if anything at all happens to me, if I suddenly stop broadcasting one day, and people are going, what happened to Daniel? What happened to Daniel? Where did he go? Well, you know exactly what happened to Daniel. He's face up in a river somewhere, bloated. His carcass is bloated, and he's got black goo coming out of his mouth. That's what happened to Daniel. He's sitting in a van down by the river. No, wait, that's a different outcome. Sorry. What else do we have to talk about? But seriously, guys, seriously, if I disappear, you know what happened. And you know where all the LSD is hidden. I'm just kidding. I didn't hide any LSD anywhere. Jeez. A lot going on in the world today. One thing I think that I will start off with, let's see here. I want to talk about this news story that I came across. It's from dailymail.co.uk. Once again, we're dealing with a publication in the United Kingdom. It says that an alien satellite was shot down by the Illuminati. An alien satellite set up more than 12,000 years ago to spy on humans has been shot down by elite soldiers from the Illuminati, UFO hunters claim. The spacecraft known as the Black Knight satellite was blasted by a secret Illuminati warplane in a clip that conspiracy theorists claim was posted on WikiLeaks. The radical claims were made by controversial UFO channel Secure Team 10, who believes NASA is covering up evidence of aliens. Okay, so the reason why I chose this news article is because I actually am subscribed to the Secure Team 10 channel. And I've been watching his stuff for a while. And I would say that it's a mix of things that could be real. I would say that's about 25% of it. And the other 75% is stuff that is just obviously fake. A lot of this stuff is old. A lot of the times this guy is finding old stuff and he's making these videos, he's doing these little voiceovers, and he's uploading it to his YouTube channel. To me, it looks like clickbait, sorry. So he's just putting this stuff out there, hoping people click and watch his videos. He's like P.T. Barnum. He's coming up with outlandish, weird stuff to get people to watch, and he doesn't really care if it's real or not, from what I can tell. I mean, obviously, if he was using any sort of discernment, any sort of scrutiny for what he's uploading, he wouldn't be making these clams. He wouldn't be making these claims like a secret Illuminati warplane shot down the Black Knight satellite. I mean, I haven't watched the video. Maybe I shouldn't be judging it at this point. But that sounds god-awful, stupid, and made up, doesn't it? I mean, who is he to make a claim like that based on some video footage or based on some pictures or something like that? How does he know that it's a 12,000-year-old satellite? How does he know that the Illuminati is trying to shoot it down? How does he know what's going on? I mean, I appreciate the fact that the guy he's putting himself out there, he's making people aware of aliens and UFOs and weird things out in space and stuff like that. I think that's definitely a positive. But when you do it in a way where you're obviously just trying to get people to click and obviously just trying to rack up those YouTube views, then to me, a person like that doesn't have a ton of credibility. In fact, I remember, you know how when you're on YouTube, you open up YouTube and it will show you things from channels that you're subscribed to. Well, one of his videos popped up, And the guy is sitting there doing a video bitching about how YouTube cut back his YouTube money, and now he can't sit on his butt all day and sit at home and sit in front of the computer and upload these fake looking videos all the time. Yeah, he's just trying to get clicks so that he doesn't have to work. He wants to sit on his butt all day, right? I mean, I have nothing against the guy. I don't mean to be attacking anybody or anything like that. It's just I came across this story and I thought to myself, this is exactly what's wrong with the community, the truth-seeking UFO community, whatever. There's so many people out there that are trying to make a quick buck, and they're not really using any sort of discernment. They're not using any sort of integrity. They're not using any sort of... They're just trying to make money is basically what's going on. At least I think it is with this guy. I mean, why would you make these videos every day about all these different subjects, all these different sightings, videos, and stuff like that, and then get up on there and complain that you're not making enough money? Why would you do that? That instantly destroys any credibility that you might have. And this guy, he only seems to be like 20-something, maybe 24, 25, 26. I don't really know how old he is, but I just have to ask, why are you putting it on YouTube or putting it on people out there, anything like that, to make sure that you can pay your bills? If you're going to get involved in this sort of business, if you want to call it that, if you're going to get involved in truth-seeking, UFO matters and things like that, you really got to think about how you're coming across. If you're just throwing tons of stuff out there, wanting people to click it, pretty soon your reputation is going to go to shit, especially if you start complaining about money issues. Because if that's the case, you shouldn't even be doing that. You should be working a normal job just like everybody else, instead of trying to find some scammy, quick way to make money so you don't have to deal with a boss, you don't have to deal with some jerk telling you what to do. Right? I mean, I'm not saying that a person should not make money for their efforts. That's not my point. If you write a book, if you are making videos that you charge for, if you're doing stuff like that, or you're providing a service, I don't really have a problem with that. It's just when you go out there and you make all these wild claims just because you're trying to get people to click on your videos, and you're trying to make... I mean, you make so little off of those YouTube videos. You make pennies. Like, how many views do you even have to... You have to have, like, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views just to make, like, $100 or something like that. Like, a small, piddly amount of money that most people nowadays would wipe their ass with. It's not it's not going to sustain you. I really advise people out there that are thinking, oh, I'm going to start a podcast, or I'm going to start doing this or that, and I'm going to make a living off of it. I'm going to tell you exactly what parents tell their kids. Have a backup plan. You know what I mean? Have a realistic plan of how you're going to make money and save your money, and be as realistic as you can be. Save. Don't maximize your time. Spend your time on what is making you money, not on what you theoretically should make you money. Spend your time on what will actually do it. If that means going to work and clocking in, then it means going to work and clocking in. But when you create these YouTube channels, just putting obvious fakery out there, and you're tricking people, you make us all look bad. And especially if it's just so that you can sit on your lazy little millennial butt and upload stuff to YouTube all day. And I don't mean to pick on any particular person. I don't know this guy. I don't have anything against him. Like I said, I think it's really good what he's doing. It's just when I come across articles like this, I have to give my thoughts on it, because I consider myself to be part of the UFO community and all of that. And when you make yourself look bad, you make us all look bad. And I'm sure I make myself look bad all the time and make others look bad. But we're not talking about that right now, right? Okay. Let's see here. I got a letter from a listener here. It says, "Hi, Dan Man." I guess that's my name now, Dan Man. "The Earth isn't flat. Please just stop. You sound like an idiot Christian who doesn't believe in dinosaurs and thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old. Bender." Well, first of all, Bender, thank you for the email. As far as the flat Earth stuff, I just find it to be interesting. I think it's really a lot of fun looking into this and having your head screwed with. I mean, you look into it, you study it, and it just gets worse and worse, right? You become even more and more confused as to the shape of the Earth, what exactly is going on. I don't know. I mean, today I had to put on my space hat, meaning that for today I believe the Earth is round, I believe in space, I believe in all those things. I believe all those things are real. And most likely they are. I mean, given between the two, most likely the Earth is not flat, right? It's just that I don't have any definite proof for myself, and I would rather continue to research the topic. Unless I'm fully convinced that it's a complete impossibility, unless I go back to the point where I find it to be completely stupid like I used to think, I see no reason to give up on it. I see no reason to stop. If it offends you, I'm sorry. Maybe you should open your mind a little bit and really think about where the information that you've always believed is coming from and whether or not it can really be trusted. And if that means that I'm not going to be the popular kid in class, if that means that everybody's not going to like me, I don't care. I've said this time and time again. I'm not in this to make friends. I'm not trying to get people to like me. I'm not trying to lead a revolt or anything like that. I'm not trying to do that. For example, V from the Red Core Hard Pill podcast came on the show a little while ago, and I kind of got a little argumentative with him because he was talking about having guns and holding up somewhere and stuff like that. I just don't really care for that type of talk. I think it's dangerous. I think anytime you talk about organizing, anytime you talk about guns, I think that you are raising a big red flag. And I don't feel like I need to do that. I don't feel like I need to stockpile guns. I don't feel like I need to organize some little cult group or anything like that. I feel like the best weapon that you can use is information. Like, the one thing I do like about Alex Jones is I like the name of his site. That's about it. I like the name InfoWars because we really are in an info war. It's all about information. There's a lot of infotainment out there, a lot of disinfo, but information is key. If we're presenting real and accurate information, then I think we're doing a good thing. I don't think that we have to stockpile guns or fight anybody or anything like that. I mean, that's ridiculous. How could we possibly win? You're not going to... A tiny little group of people isn't going to overcome a much larger group. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. Of course it's happened. But realistically speaking, I believe that you have to use a different way of fighting. You have to use the fighting that somebody like Martin Luther King would do or Muhammad Gandhi. Peaceful type of fighting. Peaceful fighting that works on a psychological level, so you don't have to get anybody killed. And actually, that type of fighting works better in the long run, because people in the future look back and they see it. They see what you were willing to do. They see the sacrifices you were willing to make. What else do we have here? Have you noticed that there's a lot of talk of like faith-based? You hear that word faith-based a lot on this program recently. Are we morphing into a faith-based program? No, don't worry. We're not going to do anything like that. I just think it's funny that word keeps popping up on the program. Is that some sort of odd bit of synchronicity there? A little bit of magic? Who's to say? I do want to talk about gang stalking a little bit. I might have mentioned this already, but if anybody out there feels like they're being gang stalked, harassed, or anything like that, you can use this program. I want you to contact me and let me know what's going on. If you feel like you have some sort of gang stalking going on, whether you feel like it's human or you feel like there's some sort of alien activity going on, if you feel like it's technology, whatever, shoot me an email. Shoot me an email at danielendofdaysradio@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to have you on this program. Don't feel like you are all alone. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. Don't let them intimidate you and instill fear into you. That's what they want after all. just shoot me an email at danielendofdaysradio@gmail.com. I'm not saying I'm going to be able to do anything about it. I'm not saying that. I'm not going to be able to stop it for you, but I can certainly talk to you about it. Maybe provide some tips here and there. But at least maybe the fact that you're doing what they don't want you to do, which is talking, maybe that can make you feel a little bit better because you're standing up for yourself and you're fighting back. So let me help you. Help me help you. Don't you love that phrase? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't teach it to drink. Or you can buy a man a fish, but if you teach him to fish, you fed him for life. I love those sayings. And what we really need to all do is we need to go out there and become fishers of men, right? We need to take this information and we need to seed it and we need to propagate it. One innocent lost sheep at a time. If you see a sheep out there that's wandering on its own, go up there and grab it. Grab that sheep and shave off its wool. Do it. I have some other topics that I want to cover, but I don't want to go super long. We've got another show just this Saturday, so I'm going to go ahead and save some of this stuff. But to give you an idea of the schedule, this Saturday night, we're back on Saturday night finally. Thank God. It's going to be nice to do a show on a Saturday night again. We'll be talking to the legendary Wolfman Mike from the Monster Castle Paranormal podcast. That is the guy, Wolfman Mike is the guy behind the Flat Earth song, Flat Earth Heads. You know, Flat Earth Heads, you know that they lied to us. Da-da-da. It's so irritatingly catchy. I just can't get enough of it. I played it on the last show, so if you haven't heard it yet, if you haven't heard that last show, go back and listen to the Flat Earth. Oh, somebody's calling. Somebody's calling. Is about to get off air. Let's see here. Hello?
Hello.
Hey there, buddy.
What's going on, Daniel?
Not much. Haven't talked to you in a while.
Oh, shit, I'm so busy. But listening to the show, love of your theme song. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Todd here, he had a little bit to do with that theme song, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, it was so fun.
Brought to you by Todd the Bod.
Hell yeah, love that. I appreciate the opportunity to do that for you, Daniel.
Yeah, like I was saying, you almost sound a little bit like a modern day Ozzy Osbourne, just a little bit.
Yeah, I like to, I have my own style for sure. Not everybody likes it, but I love it, and so.
Yeah, I think
all that counts.
I think it's great because it kind of has that retro feel, and it really matches the show. It kind of tells a story. If you listen closely, all you people out there, if you listen closely, there's some little Easter eggs hidden in there. So check that out when you have the time. Listen closely to that intro.
Yeah, totally. Not to mention all your past shows. Dang. Marshall Matt Masters is just incredible guest to have on there. Love the show.
Yeah, he was fantastic. Some of the stuff he's talking about, it's a little scary, but hey, this is what we're dealing with. This is the reality that we deal with when we approach topics like this.
He's one of the spookiest experts on it, Planet X, that you can find. His vision of how it's going to come down is just spooky.
Yeah, for sure. I personally find it very interesting because I've always believed in a Nibiru or a Planet X ever since I read Zecharia Sitchin's books, the 10th Planet, or is it the 13th Planet series? I don't remember, but those books are just awesome.
12th Planet.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that. The 12th Planet series. There's like nine books in there, something like that. It just goes on. And the last book, or one of the last ones, is actually called The End of Days. And the name of the show had a little bit to do with me just loving that book so much.
Wow, I didn't read that one, but I did read a few of those, maybe about 3 of his, and they're intense. I've got a couple still. And his book, Gold of the Gods, it's just the information in there, you wouldn't find it anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that whole thing is true. The whole thing with the Anunnaki, the whole thing with the mining for gold, it's in the records. Yeah. There's plenty of evidence for it. You can look at the same sorts of things happening in multiple continents during the same period of history. They were doing the same stuff, mining these minerals, mining the gold. There's so much evidence for it.
And mines that are hundreds of thousands of years old. The book Gold of the Gods was really cool because it went into all these numbers that were collected by Spain when it was involved in trying to take over South and Central America when there was a race to colonize the land down there. They were grabbing all this gold, and it was just tons and tons of it. Every city they went to was more gold, and they're like, God, there must be a mine, there must be a source somewhere. And so they kept going inland and conquering all these tribes looking for the gold source. They never found it, but all these statues and everything was covered in gold, and they were taking tons of it back to Spain and smeltering it into coinage. And they kept meticulous records on how many tons they were bringing back. And that story's it's fascinating because they never found the source of the gold. And all along, the natives, they were torturing the natives, tell us where the gold is. And the natives all along said that it came from the gods. All that stuff was there when they got there, when the natives got there or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, there's the old legend of El Dorado, a place where there's supposedly all this tons and tons of gold, and a lot of people have actually set out to find it. It may or may not exist. I might go look for it myself one of these days, since I'm the adventurous type.
Oh, totally. Utah's got some lost, supposedly some people found a bunch of gold and hid it. And there's like the Lost Dutchman's mine, supposedly that people spent their whole lives trying to find it in these mountains of Utah, Nevada, and Arizona, New Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. There's all kinds of stuff like that. There's stuff like that in Washington too. Supposedly, this certain pirate ship sank, and the gold chest washed up on the shore of one of these islands around here. It might be Whidbey Island or something like that.
Yeah. Plus, you've got underground cities in Washington up there that they capped off, and they're still underground, supposedly, I've heard.
Yeah, there's that story about the Grand Canyon where supposedly there was a whole excavation site there, and they found giant skeletons and tons of crazy artifacts and lots of stuff that just shouldn't have been where it was found. There's a history of America. There's a history that has been completely wiped over. It does seem that there was some kind of civilization here, and probably a civilization that was networked globally.
Well, giant skeletons would explain, if there was a giant race, how they were able to build these incredible structures on the top of these mountains in part. Some of these footings, it looks like footings for huge machinery down in South America and Central America, though. Some of these ruins and excavations they've found are giant channels where it looks like there was huge industrial operations going on hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Yeah, that's very true. There's weird little cutouts of rock and stuff like that, and there's actually there's like temples where there's machines that will. It's almost like there was a machine that would raise and lower the water level, which should have been impossible for the technology they had at the time.
Yeah, and the Olmecs is another classic in mythology where they said that these giants came from the ocean, the red-haired giants, and the Olmecs are the ones that carved those giant stone heads, where they find those stone heads down in the jungle that are 12 feet round.
Oh yeah, those big. What's interesting about the Olmecs is that they live in South America, but they look like Africans from Africa. They have the same features, the same dark skin, the same everything. If there's any evidence that people traveled from one continent to the other, that's it right there.
Well, and also it's just strange in their mythology that they described red-headed giants that tried to kill them, or that they had to get rid of. I forget how the story goes.
Yeah, those cultures seem to know quite a bit, especially the Mayans, who my guest earlier brought up. I really want to know where the Mayans got all their information. Were they just taking psychedelic mushrooms all day, or what?
Well, their astronomy was so advanced that their view of the planets and the solar cycles and everything was just so advanced that it's like, who would spend this much time in the middle of the jungle, supposedly, even if they were the rich class at the time, calculating all the stars' movements and time cycles that go back thousands of years and stuff. It's just strange.
I'm pretty sure it was Cthulhu that wiped out the Mayans.
It could have been. I think there might be a carving on one of their temples that resembles Cthulhu highly. But on the Flat Earth show,
go ahead.
I think Flat Earth theory is pretty interesting. The more you look into it, the more anomalies there are. And we've been misled on so many things that I have a hard time believing hardly anything they've told us nowadays. I'm like, if it can be hidden from you, they probably hid it. But I find it fascinating that you can't go to Antarctica or the North Pole, and that all these treaties were made a long time ago with all the countries of the world, where none of the countries of the world get along, today, yet they're all signed up in an agreement that nobody can go to Antarctica. That's pretty weird.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is that there have been explorers that have gone down there, and they've made all kinds of wild claims about flying right on past the poles and seeing all sorts of undiscovered land and all sorts of stuff that shouldn't be there. And some people think that maybe they went inside of the hollow earth, but if you actually look at what they're saying, it seems like they just sort of kept flying and kept going, and there wasn't an end. They just kept going into a whole new territory. It seems more like that based on what they actually wrote down.
But it's very strange, though. Very strange. And like he was discussing, Charles Lindbergh, having all the problems with his family and the baby getting kidnapped, and being one of the ones that was kind of a proponent of that there was something going on, a hollow earth or something going on. So that, I keep my mind open just because some of the stuff that he talks about, they're anomalies. You can't find I talked to Al about this the other day, and he's telling me that he doesn't believe there's a flat earth because he's been up in a plane and seen the curvature of the earth. And I told him, well, I've been up in a plane and I didn't see the earth curved when I was looking out the window or whatever.
Todd, if I die, I want you to find my body. I want you to find my body, and I want you to take it to the steps of the White House and throw it on the steps of the White House, and then I want you to tell Donald Trump, this guy died for freedom.
There you go. And I'll collect a little bit of that black goo that's oozing out of your pores and have it analyzed,
It is a little scary, though, when you think about it, because there's so many of these people that disappear. There's William Cooper, Phil Schneider, Max Spears, Carla Turner, all of these people that have been looking into not flat Earth, but Planet X. I don't think they've killed any flat earthers yet.
Who knows? Yeah, it might be the Wolfman, with his Flat Earth Denial song. They're looking at the flat earthers. Oh, I'm just kidding.
They're going to take him out for that stupid song.
I love that Flat Earth song, though, especially the acoustic version.
Well, he's coming on.
Version.
Yeah, he's coming on Saturday night, and he's going to sing the acoustic version. I already talked to him about it. He's going to bring his guitar. It's on.
Oh, nice. Maybe we can get Al to call in and play his guitar,
Yeah, we can all play together.
Yeah, I can sing. We'll Skype. No.
But hey, Todd, what do you think about all these people on YouTube that are just kind of making goofy videos about ghosts and giants and sea serpents and stuff like that? And then when you click on the video, you find that it's not even anything close, and it's just some made-up bullcrap. What do you think of that?
I think it's pretty sad, and I really spend most of my time looking into what is, semi-provable, as close to the proof as you can get in this field. And I think it's sad when people muddy the waters with all that garbage, and that it hurts the cause to try to find the truth. And there's a lot of strange truth that would help people if they woke up to it. And it just muddies the waters and discredits people that are the whole field, kind of. So I think it's part government, probably involved in most of it. They probably put out most of it.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. I don't doubt that at all. And I think one of the problems is it seems like the cost of living is going up more and more. And instead, where a person was able to afford like a 3-bedroom house, 2 cars, 3 kids, and a dog, instead of being able to afford that, now all they can afford is a little apartment or something, and everybody has to supplement their income nowadays.
Yeah, slowly but surely. And I'll tell you what part of caused this is our tax dollars are going to police the whole world, and we've built this gigantic military-industrial space prison system, right? And all our tax dollars are going to sustain this monstrosity. And so that's why there's less and less money to go around, because they do their sleight of hand with the Federal Reserve System, where they suck in a little bit of the money, let a little money out, give it to who they want and their friends, and then, close it off for this part of the economy. God. Over a slow period of time, they've made it evaporate, so that, like you said, 2 people have to. God, the whole house has to work if you have older teenagers now. It's horrible.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They're just squeezing us out. They're just squeezing all the. What it is we have this great industrial nation, where it was free, and it created all this fantastic wealth and all this prosperity, and they put a cap on all that. And then they started regulating all of it and controlling the economy and the system. They don't let anybody just come out with whatever they want that would improve the world unless they can get in front of it and make the money off it. You know what I mean, Daniel? They're into monopolies.
Yeah. In fact, Todd, let me ask you a question. Donald Trump said he was going to fix a lot of this stuff. What do you think? Honestly, how do you feel about how he's done so far?
I think that it's, God, I'm suspicious. I told you, even though I'm with Trump, I'm suspicious of everybody, suspicious of him coming out the gate. But he was the only one voicing what needed to be said and shaking this thing up. And so I think, God, he's surrounded by the deep state, these people that have been in there for decades, that are in the intelligence establishment. They run all the news, they run the press, and they're playing it. They're not going to let him come in and just change things. But he's done a lot of positive things, like getting us out of the climate agreement, which was going to give $600 trillion to these guys out of the United States pocket over the next decade. I mean, that's saved us, Daniel, to a degree. They literally have they've turned us into a service economy, to where all the jobs are fast food for the kids, right?
Yeah.
Wow. It's horrible.
And they do a horrible job at it, too.
God, yeah, and then they don't make enough money for it to be worth doing a good job. So, yeah, it's this vicious downward spiral.
Yeah, hopefully things will change. By all accounts, it looks like they're not going to change, but hopefully they will. Or we might have to move to Poland.
I think a lot of people are waking up, and they are resisting as best they can. But I think that the system itself knows that, and they may be, through Alex Jones, be making an effort to siphon all the community over there that would try to save the world, right? So you can control it a little bit and run it, know who's in it. If they've got AI systems tapped into all of our areas of our society, then they're already playing us like a video game to a certain degree, Daniel.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day, the whole Alex Jones thing, where you get into the InfoWars stuff. You might get some kind of hint that there could be some kind of conspiracy going on, so you get into the Alex Jones stuff, and then you hear about him sneaking into Bohemian Grove, which should literally be impossible, considering that, considering what it is and how well it should be guarded, and the fact that he was able to just release this footage, and he claims that he himself was personally there. It's really bizarre, because you could be somebody that's into this conspiracy stuff, then you get into Jones, you sign up for InfoWars, you become part of his team, so to speak, and now his whole organization, it's morphed. One of my past guests brought this up, but it's morphed into a right-wing political organization. It's almost like everything came full circle. You start off as, believing in conspiracies, then you go off the edge, and then he brings you right back into the Republican Party.
Yeah. And, and that's how disinformation works. And believe me, these guys got a lot of practice, because over in Europe and all those countries, they already have all these parties and these groups and these right-wing and left-wing groups that counter each other. And they've been practicing this shit for a long time, and so they could easily, this could all be a PSY operation, even Jones.
Exactly.
His popularity is the first thing that makes you go, huh. He's on with Megyn Kelly. He's on Hillary Clinton saying his name.
Yeah, exactly. He's a mainstream guy now, and now he, whether it's his handlers that are making him do it, or whether it's just him and he wants to make more money, now he really cares what people think. He wants to maintain the perception of being like this right-wing Republican guy that's for the Constitution and for American freedoms and stuff like that. Yeah, and see, I'm not like that. I'm into the far out shit. I like the real fringe stuff. I like me some David Icke and stuff like that. I like to go way off the deep end. Give me some William Cooper, that sort of stuff, like way off the edge. I want to talk about aliens and spirits and things like that. I don't want to stay in the 3D level and be super obsessed with Goldman Sachs and things like that.
Yeah. It's key to understanding how our system's controlled, though. The banking and the Illuminati and the Council on Foreign Relations, all that's a real structure that sits above, perched above everything. So to understand the control mechanism, you do need to know that stuff. But he stops way back there. And I told you that there were books that wrote all about that back in the late 60s, early 70s. Some of the best books already gave you all that information way back when.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing about it. I do completely agree. We need to know about the banking schemes and stuff like that. But it's like with him, the buck stops. I mean, once we get into Bohemian Grove, why aren't we looking into what the hell those people are actually doing? Why aren't we studying ceremonial magic and learning about the history of what these people are up to? Why doesn't Jones look into any of that stuff? Why does he stop once we enter into the world of magic and the possibility that there could be interdimensionals and stuff like that? It's like he just comes to a complete halt.
If anything, he stops before he ever crosses into telling you how magic works.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's another red herring or whatever that you kind of take notice of, because once you know about the conspiracy and all that, then there's the mind and the magic and what secrets are hiding there that you don't know, that you could perform on your own. So that's valuable stuff. That's one of the reasons your show's so valuable. I hope somebody out there that's being targeted calls in or emails you or something, tells you your story. Richard Serrett does the conspiracy show out of Canada. It's like Zoomer Radio. It's like George Norrie's fill-in host.
Oh yeah, Richard Shret. Yeah, he's actually not that bad.
No, he's not that bad, but he's on the milk toast thing too. He's milk toast like George Snorri, but he has targeted individuals. He said contacting him all the time, at least one or two a week. You know, that's a lot of people. I remember back in the 80s, there was a book put out by the Subgenius group. You know the Subgeniuses? Do you remember them?
No.
In the 80s?
No.
Oh, they were a weird group that were into the Church of Bob. And Bob was this head that smoked a pipe, you know, like a tobacco pipe, this clean-cut dude. And it was just a made-up religion called the Subgeniuses. But they put out a book in the 80s that was all the weirdest people that you could contact. It'll send you some crap back in the mail. And so it was filled with over 1,000 groups, you know, the weirdest people, the conspiracy groups, the magical groups. I sent away for some of these things, supposedly that they would, you know, contact you back. And one of the ones that contacted me was this person that claimed he was being electronically harassed, and this was back in the 80s. You know, he was part of the MK Ultra mind control thing and lived in Canada and helped me. And that could all be a psyop too, Daniel, some of that, because the intelligence agencies are famous for putting a smoke screen out to make it themselves look different. They know how to create an image, and, you know, they're involved everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a form of marketing. It's controlling public perception. It's really not that hard once you have the authority to actually do it.
Yeah, and so you could send people out, you know, that were, I've been a MK Ultra victim in this, and start a following and guide people a certain way with the information. And that's all possible. That's all a possibility, you know, in a lot of these cases. That's why it's good to teach people or tell people to be discerning when they're looking at this crap.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I believe that it even goes beyond that. I believe that there's actually people that can become what are akin to matrix agents, meaning something has entered into them and taken control, and now that person has some kind of agenda that comes from somewhere else, and they might be the people that are involved in a lot of this gang stalking and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was, you know, your one guest gave some pretty interesting information about InfraGard, where they made all these people in the communities, they like deputized them and told them, you're going to be a secret agent now, just keep an eye on your neighborhood, you know.
Oh yeah, that's real nice.
So they get a call, you know, you got to go take a picture of this guy. Well, you're on down the street, see what's going on, you know. So
yeah.
Next thing you know, these people feel like they're a hero, you know.
Yeah, they're just little.
Some poor person.
They're just little brown noser, suck up little narcs, really.
Yeah. That have no business harassing people.
All right, Todd. I'm getting really super hungry. I'm to the point where I can eat a horse. So I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna wrap up this show, and I'll talk to you again.
Fantastic show. Thanks, Daniel. You have a good evening.
All right. Thanks for the call. Bye.
All right. Peace.
And there you have it. That was Todd the Bod. Could have probably gone a lot longer with him, but like I said, I am starving. I'm so hungry I could blow a horse. What did I just say? I mean, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Why did I say that? That was so weird. Tourette syndrome or something. I don't know. But I do want to just say thank you again. I know I'm always thanking you guys, but thank you for supporting the show. Thank you so much. This show means so much to me. It means so much to me that there's actually people out there listening. I think about you guys all the time. I think about all of you out there, the different ways that you're listening. I think about you all the time, just like you probably think about me. Yeah. I know you think of Daniel 24/7. I'm in the back of your mind. Back of your mind. Oh, yes. But seriously, I really like you guys. I really do. I'm so happy that you actually find my annoying self worthy to listen to for several hours a week. To me, that is more perplexing than Flat Earth or the Ort Cloud or anything like that. So thank you so much, everybody out there. I know I probably do my thank yous a little bit too much, but I don't care. I just really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you sticking with me through the thick and the thin. I appreciate you being there. I appreciate you being open-minded, and I appreciate you spreading this information and this knowledge and helping wake up humanity. Now, if you want to join us for the live show, remember to go to endofdaysradio.com, go down to the upcoming guest section, and from there you will be able to see when the live shows are going to be taking place, and then you can listen through the TuneIn Radio app, or just go to endofdaysradio.com and click play. Please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube. Follow me on Twitter. That's at Ninja Shoes. On YouTube, it's just End of Days Radio. You can also call in at 209-348-9810 or at Ninja Shoes 777 on Skype. Remember that you can call in at any point. Just let me talk to the guests for like 10 to 20 minutes before you start calling in. That's all I ask. Let me warm them up. And then when you do come on the line, just don't say anything. Let me go to you. Let me call upon you to start talking. That's the only thing I ask. Other than that, you can pretty much call in at any point. If you'd like to donate to the show, go to endofdaysradio.com and click on that donate button. You can donate through PayPal to help us keep the lights on, keep the windows up, keep the server running, or get the windows replaced when those freaking kids throw rocks through the windows. Shit like that. You know what I'm talking about. What else is there? Oh, Facebook. Go to the facebook.com/therealendofdaysradio. Click on that like button. That helps tremendously. If you go to endofdaysradio.com and join the forum as well. Need to get some more people in there talking about creepy stuff like Bigfoot and conspiracies and people like Alex Jones. We can talk about him, talk about how fat he is, how much of a fat liar he is. I like to do that. Other than that, shit, that's it. I love you guys. This is awesome. This is awesome. This is awesome. And I will see you this Saturday night at 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we will be joining up with Monster Castle Paranormal. Wolfman Mike and his broadcasting partner Darren are going to be joining me, and they will be bringing the Monster Castle with them. So we will actually be broadcasting from inside the Monster Castle. How do you like that? How do you like them apples? Yeah, it's going to be fun. And then on July 3rd at 3 p.m., I will be talking to Kiwi Niimi from Kittenhead. By the way, we did play a couple of their songs during the break. I forgot to mention. We played Derby Girl and then Betty. So still playing some Kittenhead in anticipation of that big interview on July 3rd. And we are going to be mixing things up a little bit because we did a magic theme and we're doing a podcaster theme right now. And the next theme is probably going to be like a little bit off the paranormal world, just to take a little break. I'm not saying that there aren't going to be tons of paranormal guests and stuff like that. We're just going to mix it up a little bit, see what sort of other types of shows we can do. Like maybe I can find a comedian to come on here, or maybe somebody that works with animals. Maybe somebody that has been attacked by a Siberian tiger or bitten by a shark or something like that. That'd be awesome. I mean, it doesn't always have to be extraterrestrials, right? There's plenty of vicious creatures on this planet that are really interesting that we can talk about, right? All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to hit that new intro, brought to you by Todd, his cousin Eric, Al, and I put the cherry on top. So shout out to those guys for constructing a very badass intro. I'm going to play it right now. Have a good day, everybody.
And I was shown that that Lucifer would return, that the UN and the Vatican were going to be completely behind it, again, under false pretenses. He's going to show up and say, I'm here to save the day. right? And okay, fine,
Yeah, of
go
course
ahead,
you can
try
say
it.
whatever you want.
But
I've always hated censorship. It's the internet.
Sometimes, once they get you for your first love bite, well, it depends on how aware you are, right?
I forgot my bullets. I never had a gun. Here I am left standing. Am I the only one? For what I see, memories have guilted me. I'll never see the sun.
First of all, as you know, the Anunnaki and the Draco are enemies. Second of all, underneath Baghdad was a stargate that was created by the Anunnaki so that they could transfer from Nibiru to the Earth.
I'll never see the sun. I could just end it all, but the demons will have won.
Practitioners that some are good and some use their magic for good and to heal and to help, and others do use it for evil. And in some cases people really were
This is too much sometimes.